That's at 70% of Americans, though they don't want to overturn Roe v. Wade, yet 70% of Americans are in favor of a 12-week ban.
I believe that decision should be made by the person who's pregnant with their care team, with their family, because I can't tell you why every single person got an abortion. I don't know why.
You pointed to the origins of the pro-life movement. How do you feel about the origins of the pro-choice movement? Religion to them, they already had trauma in their childhood. Religion becomes a vice of sorts, and they go super radical, and then they just swap that out, and then they're doing other things that are subtle.
I came up to my pastor, said I was struggling with my sexuality. He called me an abomination, said never to come back.
No. So here's my thoughts on. You tell me what you think.
Okay.
The ban in Mississippi.
Okay.
Was 16 weeks.
Okay.
And they pushed back against the ban.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah, something like that.
And ironically enough,
that was 6 weeks. Maybe it was 16.
I think it was 15 or 16.
Okay.
I should Google that. Zach, can you Google that? Jamie?
Yeah, we need a fact checker here.
Mississippi abortion ban, 16 weeks. The one that got it Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court.
And find the news source that makes me look good and Ruslan look bad.
What was the ban?
InfoWars.
Mississippi, is it 15 weeks or 16 weeks?
Mississippi law makes most abortion illegal after
15 weeks. Okay. So they were proposing a 15-week ban.
Okay.
They pushed against it, and how it went up to the Supreme Court is pushing against a 15-week ban, right? And
yeah.
And the ironic part about this is most of Europe has a 15-week ban.
Okay.
So Europe has a 15-week ban for abortion, right? I'm not talking Christian nationalist states in America. I'm talking Europe, France, Spain, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 15 weeks, 13 weeks. And so
no exceptions after that. I'm just curious. Like after 15 weeks, there's no exceptions.
I think there's exceptions for like women's, like if you're gonna for sure die. Like I think there's some exceptions for that.
Not very familiar with their laws.
Ironically enough, Israel has a fairly conservative law, but then you can get a doctor's exemption like way late. So they kind of got this bizarre like both sides thing.
Okay.
So anyway, so they have this they're pushing back against 16 weeks when most of Europe is at 14, some 12. And there was a stat that said 70% of Americans, though they don't want to overturn Roe v. Wade, yet 70% of Americans are in favor of a 12-week ban.
Okay. Are you sure about that? I know Pew Research, I don't think was 12 weeks last time I checked. I think it was like the idea of like abortion with some kind of regulation. I don't think it was super specific, the one that I read.
Restrictions at 12 weeks. I think like the 12 weeks is kind of like the cutoff, and then they were okay with certain instances of abortion. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that. I could dig that up for you.
Yeah, whatever.
Because I remember covering it, and there's like a graphic, and yeah. Anyway, so this is my thought. So I think what happened was, I think they played themselves. I think the pro-choice lobby played themselves in miscalculating that there was already Supreme Court justices and fighting for a ban in Mississippi, which is a very conservative state. Had they let that ban stand at 16 weeks in Mississippi, which is more liberal than most of Europe, it would have never made it to the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade would have never got overturned. So from my vantage point, I think it was hubris at its finest. I think they should have just left it alone, and they would have still had Roe v. Wade. So what do you think about that? Just without getting into details of abortion.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, there's been a push since really the 80s, because abortion was not really a cultural war talking point until Jerry Falwell made it one in the moral majority movement. There's always been a push in evangelical spaces to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Can you pull your little thing back? It looks.
I'm sorry. Am I off here?
It just looks a little funky.
My bad.
That way.
This guy here?
Yeah.
Is this better?
I just didn't want you looking crazy.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you're looking out for me. I appreciate that. Am I cool now?
Yes. So you are right in that they definitely took abortion and made it like the issue. Before that, it was segregated schools.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
And they did do that. Do you think the invent of the sonogram and the movie Silent Screams had anything to do with that becoming the issue? Meaning that up until that point, it was like Christians... I even think Southern Baptist.
Yeah, SBC for almost 10 years, no problems.
Quivering? Was that what they kind of did the cutoff at? Abortion was permitted until quivering.
I honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, because I remember, what is the dude's name? Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Phil from
Vischer?
Phil Vischer,
Holy Post.
Holy Post, said that he holds the position of exceptions for rape, exceptions for incest, yada yada. That was the position I think he said of the Southern Baptist or
The
the
SBC's
Evangelicals.
take was pretty much that abortion should be allowed if it endangers the life or well-being, including emotional health of the mother. And then you can see that like the revisions over like year after year as like the situation changed to eventually become like the more typical pro-life movement. And then also I know that Christianity Today did I think a 15 or 20 person like scholar debate on like on one of their issues of like, is abortion in the Bible or not? And they were all pretty much like, it's pretty inconclusive. Like it should be a personal choice. And like, it should be up to like essentially the person who's pregnant. So I know that like that was kind of the position for a lot of people for a long time. It obviously has shifted now.
You're talking about that Numbers verse about the woman with the swollen belly. And
I don't think it's
thing?
that one, because even like people, like I think actual biblical scholars, regardless of their position on abortion, would say that's not really talking about that. It's not really a good take.
Okay.
I know that there's a verse in Exodus, I think, that references something, but again, I don't want to speak out of my where I'm at. I just don't know.
Okay.
Just to answer your question though, essentially what I guess my angle would be that we've all known for a long time there's been a big push to get the Supreme Court full of people who would be open to overturning Roe v. Wade.
Sure.
And there's a lot of documentation of just the funding and money that went into putting specific justices in front of Trump to get them on the court, and then they pushed against that. That's when the Mississippi thing became a thing to go up to the Supreme Court to get overturned. I do know that according to Pew, for sure, this I definitely know as a fact, according to the research, I should say, it's all research driven. The only group of people in America out of any religious group in the affirmative, meaning the majority wanted Roe v. Wade overturned, were white evangelical Protestants. No other religious group ever, Muslims, Jews included, were in the majority on that. So definitely wasn't a popular decision.
So my question to you is, do you think, is someone at the door? Oh, okay. Sorry. My question to you is, do you think that when Silent Scream came out,
okay,
which was in the 80s,
all right,
and you saw a 12-week abortion, the nation got to see a 12-week abortion, that the access to technology and information is what's changing people's perception on this. Live Nation has really good content. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, where they show people what an abortion looks like at different stages. They show the procedure, and it's great content, but it seems like the more people are aware of what's physically happening, the more they shift and take a harsher stance against it.
Yeah, you're asking a question I've never been asked before, because I don't even know about the movie you're talking about. I was born in '88, so I don't know. Okay. That definitely could be a part of.
It's like out of sight, out of mind.
What's interesting,
you know what I mean?
though, is that like I think statistically, again, like Roe v. Wade was a popular decision that most people wanted upheld.
In 1972 is when it passed, right?
Yeah, I used to have the shirt that said, the date, 73, I think.
73.
It would say silence underneath.
Let me see when Silent Scream came out.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I mean, it could be. Sure, yeah, I don't know. That's my honest answer. I don't know.
No, that's fair. Because I don't know. Because 1984 is so this is like technology's finally advancing. They release the Silent Scream, and they show basically a sonogram. Is it sonogram? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
They show the sonogram of an actual abortion taking place, and this seems to be. When this comes out, this seems to be when it like unlocks and more people become aware of why abortion is bad.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like because before that, like you don't really know what's in there. You don't know how developed the baby is. You're guessing, and so I think there's something that happens in that window from Roe v. Wade passing and then the 80s and the technology advancing, and now we have 40 sonograms, which I'm not sure how familiar you are with the pro-life movement, but they say one of the most effective ways to deter abortion is by simply parking a 40 sonogram van in front of an abortion clinic, and just giving out free 40 sonograms, and then mothers will come see their baby and be like, yeah, no, like that's a human in there, right? So I guess I'm saying all this to say like, there seems to be a consensus on something that people are ignorant about.
Okay.
Right? And because they're ignorant about, and they don't know what a 7-week fetus has 10 fingers, 10 toes, you know what I mean? Their eyeballs are developed. and a 12-week fetus. I mean, that's a baby in there at 12 weeks, right? When people don't know, then you don't know what you don't know. And so if you're ignorant of what's happening and how brutal the procedure could be and all these things, that's when people seem to shift. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I literally have never thought about. I don't know is my answer. I think it's reasonable. Let's put it that way. I think
we could watch Silent Scream.
No. I'm not saying that.
This is a 40s
no. What
autograph.
I'm trying to say is like Yes, it seems like it's a reasonable thing. I don't know if that's what's driven the push, but even, I mean, I guess what I would say is like, I'm not sure maybe how, I'm trying to answer your questions. Being asked a question I've never really been asked before.
Sure.
So that's why I'm kind of stuttering here. But I guess what I would say is like, as far as I'm aware, abortion is still like, you know, the majority are still in favor of having some access to abortion rights, we can say, in some way, shape, or form.
Correct.
So I'm not sure maybe how effective those videos were, because you would think that if they were as effective as you thought, like it'd be like a universal, like, whoa, like this is a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I certainly could say maybe it was another ingredient in the growth of the pro-life movement. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I the only point I'm trying to make is like it seems like the more information we get, the more people's minds change. This is a bad parallel.
Okay.
Well, we've had a few of those today. Okay.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, someone grows up in the Confederate South. They don't know any black people. All of a sudden, they have black friends. Their mind changes about black people.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying in the same way, you don't know that what that's in there until you see a movie of an abortion taking place, and then your mind can change.
It could change.
You know. And just to be fair, when you go and research it on your own, there was definitely pushback in saying that because it was called Silent Scream, that wasn't accurate because the baby can't actually scream. And when you see the baby in the video open its mouth, there's no way to prove that it felt pain and yada, yada, yada. So there was definitely pushback against the film as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like the more people get to know the particulars of the issue and get to know what the procedure is and get to know the additional ramifications on the woman's body and all these things, that the more information people have, the more clarity they have, even outside of just a religious paradigm, right? Like even outside of a faith-based paradigm.
Yeah, I have seen a few accounts pop up in my feed that are like either atheists or humanists who are claiming like pro-life pretty much. I've seen like some of their videos and stuff. So I would say, yeah, I definitely have seen like I'm not sure if it's a growth, but I've noticed that these accounts exist beyond the typical Christian pro-life ethic. But I think that they're still in obviously the minority regarding like their own, I don't know, people groups. Is that even the right word? I don't know.
Yeah, so I went down the rabbit hole of this because oddly enough, my therapist is like a huge pro-life advocate, and I didn't know this until after the time of Roe v. Wade. And then I kind of went and did because only information I had about the pro-life movement was like, oh, Jerry Falwell bait and switched it with segregation, and now here we are. And it's like, no, there's decades of stuff in between then that got it to where it is today. You know?
Interesting.
So anyway, so in terms of abortion, you are pro-choice.
Yeah.
You're pro-choice legally.
Yeah.
But on a personal level, would you say you're against abortion?
No.
Okay.
In fact, my own the story of my wife getting pregnant actually changed my perspective on this.
Okay.
Ironically.
Okay.
So my wife got pregnant. We have 2 beautiful kids. And it was our first appointment ever. As you know, people who are now pregnant, you know, I'm like, okay. Yeah. And the nurse was like, the doctor was like really thorough, hour-long, just like, you know, intake kind of thing. And they mentioned, they're like, hey, you know, just so you know, we test for all these things, yada, yada, yada. And we test for this one, like, I think a genetic thing that essentially, I'm blanking on the name of what they call it, but what the doctor told us was like, listen, depending on if this thing comes back positive or not, and depending on what level it is, there's like, it goes from a 80% to 100% chance of non-viability once it's born. Okay. And I go, okay. And they go, and so if that came back, you'd have to make a decision. And I was like, what? Oh. And I was like, whoa. And I thought to myself, I said, you know, luckily our son was not tested positive. But if that test came back positive, especially, it was very early, I think it was like we were at week 6 or 8. I would much rather that decision of what my wife should do be between my wife, who is the one pregnant, me and the doctor, than the state saying I should do anything one way or the other. Whether that would be, sorry, you have to give... you have to bring this fetus to full term because it has a heartbeat, even though you know you're going to give birth to most likely or definitely a stillborn baby. or the government saying, no, you have to have an abortion right now. That was one of the moments, this was early on, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, for me, where I went, ooh, maybe this is a little more of a nuanced conversation than some people just want to murder babies and other people just are fighting to the death to protect, I just don't think it's always that black and white. And so because it's a medical thing, because there are contexts and things involved in a situation that I'm not privy to, I think ultimately that decision should be left up to the person who is pregnant and their medical team and their family, because I wouldn't know the context that led them to that decision. Okay. That's kind of my overall. Of course, listen, there are always exceptions. I don't think someone should be able to go at week 49, and just say, hey, I'm bored. Can we just 49. Go ahead and, sorry, 39. Obviously,
was that a joke?
I've obviously never been pregnant before, and we couldn't tell. But I think yeah, sure. I'm not one of these people who's like, hey, nothing should be regulated here. Okay. But I do think that the pro-life movement I grew up in was very much I had a shirt that said in all caps, abortion is homicide. And on the back had you won't silence my message. You'll stop. You won't mock my God. You'll stop killing my generation. Yeah. And that experience with my partner taught me you know what? Sometimes what happens there is not what's going on that t-shirt. And so that was kind of the experience that led me to rethink ultimately, yes, it's definitely a weighty decision. Obviously, we're talking about things that are important. I don't want to devalue, what's happening inside or anything like that. But sometimes things come back with technology where people are put in impossible scenarios. Or I'll give you one more quick example. And this is not as common, but it still happens. There was recently a story in Time magazine of a 7th grader who was S8. She was pregnant. She hit it beyond 15 weeks because she was so terrified. She got so sick she was vomiting. Her mom found out that she was pregnant, and because there was no clinic in the area, they couldn't afford to drive 3 hours to have an abortion. And the 7th grader is now a mom at 7th grade, which obviously could have torn her body apart. Your body isn't really formed then. So there are also times like that where things like that happen that I go, yeah, I'm not saying that it's not a weighty decision. I'm not saying we shouldn't wrestle through it, but I'm not the one who had nothing consensual happen to me and now has to live with something that could be either bodily life-changing or, how does that child grow up? How does that child have a mother who's 12 years old? How does that work? What's their social status like? So those are some of the things that I think have shifted my take of always outlawed almost always to well, I just don't think it's my call to make those incredibly tough decisions.
Do you think that if someone's child has Down syndrome or autism and they could test for that, that's an appropriate reason to get an abortion?
Yeah, I don't think, listen, I want to be clear to whoever's listening to this on my end. I am not the person who's pregnant. Okay, I understand that. These are just some of my thoughts as I'm thinking about them out loud. I know in Iceland, there was a big thing about this where they were getting concerned because they were testing for Down syndrome and people were just aborting, And some of the ethicists who were not Christian were like, are we playing God? Where does this get to the line?
It sounds like eugenics.
I think that there are conversations where it's hey, we're flirting with some things that could be a little dangerous here. So I don't think that those are necessarily, good reasons. I also want to add one more thing. I think this kind of goes I think maybe you and I would have agreement here. I think that what adds to this situation is when you're in a country, and I can't talk about Iceland, I'm talking about America, where if there is something, abnormal, I guess we could say, you don't know how you're going to afford the healthcare. You don't know how you're going to afford the not being able to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. So I can understand the pressure of someone who's okay, I am 12 weeks pregnant and I have no clue how I could make this work in any single way possible. And so I think that the option for me is to do this. I understand that, but I also, you agree, or like you said, I do think we have to be wise when we navigate things that can be very complex and nuanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think what happens is you're pointing to horrific situations, right? Your wife having to carry a non-viable pregnancy that she knows is going to be that's awful, right?
Yeah.
I think the flip side of that is when we're looking at the numbers and who is having the abortions. 45% of abortions are by women who've previously had abortions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So would you say we shouldn't have abortion on demand as birth control?
Well, and this I think is the major problem that I have with people, not you, I'm gonna be clear about that, but maybe politicians who claim to be pro-life, when you're fighting access to affordable health care that would include birth control, when you don't want sex ed taught in schools, when you don't want any of those things, and then you also want to limit like what should be, I think, for a lot of people in a perfect world, a last resort, or if something is not right, right? Like what do we expect to happen? You know, like what do we expect? I mean, there are many people in the Christian space who are like, hey, abstinence is the only way. We're not going to support affordable birth control for women. Like, sorry, not gonna, we Hobby Lobby did this with Obamacare because they saw it as an what's the word, abortificant, or they saw it as abortion essentially.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so they're like, no, we shouldn't have to provide birth control pills to our employees. Like, guys, we could easily make abortion accessible to people who need it and greatly reduce the need for, maybe we can say, unnecessary abortion. I mean, I'm using language on the fly here, by expanding things that we all know absolutely work, and somehow we don't. So that's kind of my take on that.
So at what point do you think it becomes morally reprehensible or wrong or evil to terminate an unborn pregnancy?
I don't know.
Viable, baby's going to be healthy, all of it.
I don't know, because in the case of that 7th grader, right, because she was so terrified and didn't tell her mom, you know, I think it was like week 20, right? So, but again, like, what do we do in that situation? Like, that's like very difficult. So I don't know.
You punish the baby for the sins of the rapist dad?
Do you punish the girl for the sins of the rapist dad?
I have a feeling that...
Because that dad's in prison.
Good.
That girl's probably in poverty.
I think he should be terminated.
Okay. I'm just saying, like, I think this is where it gets sticky in this conversation, because one side will say like, well, you're arguing that you want to kill a human to save for someone else. And what I'm trying to say is, like, honestly, if it comes down to like a 7th grader who has to live with the lifelong trauma of what happened to her, you know, or like a fetus that is 12 weeks old, I understand why that decision could happen. I don't. It's not my decision to make. Is what I'm trying to say.
Right. What I'm saying is, I don't think 2 wrongs make a right. I don't think that you punish the person that had nothing to do with the situation, which is the baby, the most vulnerable in the situation, because of the father. And then, how many people you know that almost aborted but kept their baby?
I don't really know. We don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know quite a few, like close friends.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that regrets not having the abortion.
Okay.
I don't know anyone that you get what I'm saying?
Totally, but I guess this comes back to a very simple point. All I'm asking is, who makes that decision? Who has the autonomy to make that call? The government or the person who has been violated? That's all I'm asking you.
Who gets to make that call?
Yeah.
We have laws all the time restricting people from bodily autonomy.
That's what I'm asking you. I'm saying in the case of the 7th grader, who has the say in what happens to them?
Who has the say?
Yeah, does the government have the right to? The government does.
The government. I think so. Yeah, in the same way. If someone wants to drink, that's their prerogative. If someone wants to drink and drive, the government steps in and goes, no, you're not allowed to do that. Because there's other people at play. There's other people at risk. Right? So I would categorize abortion in the same exact
Oh, yeah,
spot.
I wouldn't see it that way.
Why not?
All the reasons I just said. I just said them already. You know, a 7th grader being violated with a fetus inside of them, I think has the right to determine what happens to that fetus.
Why?
Because it's inside of them, and it was planted inside of them without consent.
Okay.
Like, literally, that 7-year-old or 7th grader has to live with the memories of an adult man, right?
She's going to live with, she's going to live with the memories regardless.
Right? And then she also has to take the risk of giving birth as a 7th grader, which is incredibly risky, where she could bleed out, where she could have some serious problems, where it could be too late by the time they get there. So all I'm trying to say is that in these situations that are incredibly complicated with many layers, I don't think it's the government's right or job to say, sorry, we're going to make the call on what happens to you for the rest of your life because it's something that you could not control.
The government often, like I just mentioned, restricts all types of autonomy.
Sure.
Right. So I guess my question is, like, I don't understand the need to. It just really does seem like you fix a wrong by doing another wrong.
I don't think it's wrong. That's the difference that we have.
Well, why?
What do you mean?
Why do you not think it's wrong? You think it's wrong
Because given the
of evil?
circumstances, there's really no winning. There's no
Sure
good
there is.
solution.
Sure, there is.
No, forcing a seventh grader to give birth is the right solution. Is that the
again-
moral take?
Again,
Is that the moral take?
how many teenage mothers do you know?
Who were in 7th grade when they were SA'd and forced to give birth? I know 16-year-olds, maybe one. I know 18-year-olds.
Okay.
A 7th grader, I know of none.
Okay. Do you think it's you know of none? I don't know of any 7th graders, to be fair, but I do know a lot of people that were teenage mothers and grew up and figured it out, and they don't regret having their kids.
Again, though, all I'm saying is it's just not your call. Like, it's not your decision to make that decision.
But do you think it's reasonable to point to the fringe examples of less than 2% of cases, which are from rape, incest, and the mother's health being at risk, and then using those to make emotionally charged arguments for the other 98% of cases?
So now, okay, we're going to shift the argument. So 95% of abortions happen before 6 weeks.
Okay.
So why do you think Republicans use
It's not that high.
Yes, it's 90s for sure.
It's in the
92.
I think it's be below 10 weeks.
I know that 1% of abortions happen in the 3rd trimester. 1%.
Sure.
And that doesn't stop the RNC debate from saying they want on-demand up-to-birth abortions. Okay, when you have an abortion at the 3rd trimester, I've talked to many healthcare providers. Something has gone catastrophically wrong. You have a nursery, you are ready. And then that happens. So even this conversation I have found of like, well, there are people who just want, the baby can be born alive and they can just, okay.
I'm not making that argument.
I'm not saying you are, but like, do you push against that as well as much as you're pushing against me for using the 7th grader example?
I think generally speaking, ending a human life is wrong. Abortion ends a human life, and therefore it's wrong.
Okay.
Across the board.
Yeah, no ifs or buts. Incest, rape doesn't matter.
No.
Yeah, I would disagree on that, frankly.
And so I think what it comes down to is, what are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing the woman's bodily autonomy? Are we prioritizing
and her well-being and her emotional support?
Her emotional support? Are we her
physical health
opportunity for going to college? Or are we prioritizing a vulnerable baby that doesn't have any voice and any autonomy?
I think, and this is where it gets tricky for me, because I don't want to come across as someone who sounds callous or is trying to sound like harsh or even like dehumanizing, But and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, I don't know, but like, as a 6-week-old zygote, I don't think has the same level, right, of human value and put in that situation of it was planted there not consensually in this 7th grade might have to give birth. I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not even saying it's black and white. I'm just saying how I can understand how someone can make a different decision that I might have made and that they should have the right to do that given the circumstances. Like, we have to be able to recognize
why
that.
shouldn't someone be allowed to drink and drive?
What?
Why shouldn't someone be allowed to drink and drive?
Sorry. What did
they had a long day. They got into an argument with their spouse. Their work is hard. They're stressed out. They had a few
people who
too many
drink and drive do so consensually. They drink consensually.
Okay.
They drink enough to drive.
Sure.
We're talking about something that happened to someone. That
I'm not talking about the rape.
In 90,
say the pro-life hypotheticals.
there are a lot of reasons that
say the pro-life movement conceded and was like, you know what, rape, incest, fine, you can have those. Would you then condemn the other 98% of rape?
No, sometimes the
90%.
condom breaks. Sometimes whatever happened wasn't. And there are times where people, I've heard stories again from women who are like, yeah, I can't say it was SA, but like he was not supposed to do that. That wasn't planned. And now that guy's gone and now I'm pregnant. And so, but I think, just so you know, I want to be sure I'm very clear on here. I'm not one of these people who's like, hey man, like shout your abortion. Okay. That's not my particular stance on it. Okay. My take is that let's get real pragmatic. Let's agree on something that we both agree on. We want to see less abortions in America. I certainly do. There are easy ways to do that.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to sex ed and all that kind of stuff.
That's what frustrates me though, is that my experience of the pro-life movement, right, is heavy on pushing for policies to take away someone's potential necessary right to do something that they wouldn't agree with that they call abortion, versus saying, hey, let's get affordable childcare in place. Hey, let's get affordable access to contraception in place. Hey, let's educate people on sexual responsibility. Hey, let's do our best to make sure that if an unplanned pregnancy happens, right, they are fully supported by our society. Those are not policies that we see being pushed. And in fact, whenever they are offered up, usually the talking point from the pro-life, like adjacent right-wing media, talk radio side is that's socialism, that's communism, that's a nanny state. So I really see this is like, pragmatically, I'm like, guys, we could easily, we can merge these two things. Like it could be a both and here. But if I'm forced to be on like one side of this issue or the other, for where I land now compared to where I was, is I believe that decision should be made by the person who's pregnant with their care team, with their family, because I can't tell you why every single person got an abortion. I don't know why, right? And frankly, it's not my job. Oh, sorry, my phone's going off. Nor am I responsible for that ultimately.
Yeah,
That's how I would see it.
I understand how you see it. I'm just saying, logically speaking, it doesn't seem like there's a strong cutoff anywhere in your process. That's what you're telling me. You're saying that in certain instances, the state has a right to set restrictions on certain acts, but in this one, it's okay. I've conceded that it's complicated at times, right?
Yeah.
And I would say I don't know what your interactions were like with the pro-life movement. I partner with two organizations, liveaction.org and the Human Coalition, both of which do stuff to support mothers, both of which do stuff to help pay diapers. And
not legislatively, though, like personally. And that's the problem.
Well, the thing about legislatively, which is a whole nother can of worms, we can come back to it, is like, who pays for it?
Thank you.
Right?
And here we are. This is exactly my point.
No. But let me just pose it this way. Let me just pose it this way. The Scandinavian nations, they have more safety nets, support systems, so on and so forth, right? They also pay more in taxes, right? Which is like, if we as a society collectively come to the place of, hey, you're willing to see a 15% increase on your taxes, I'm willing to see a 15% increase on our taxes, we collectively say we want to see more increase in taxes so that we could have these programs, okay, cool. Like, that's where we came to. I'm not opposed to those things intrinsically. I understand that there's a give and a take in terms of which policies are paid for, which policies are not paid for, what we provide, what we don't provide. I think the tough part is, how do you get people to come to that conclusion to fund some of these things instead of the government printing trillions of dollars, not literally printing, but typing in trillions of dollars, which then the more money that comes to the economy, then you cause inflation, the dollar, people are already struggling, right? That's what I'm getting at. But I think, like, if we collectively come to the place of like, hey, I think we should agree that childcare should be whatever, right? Childcare, universal health care, all these things. If we as a society collectively come to those conclusions, that's a different conversation. The issue is there's a lot of stuff being proposed without a lot of, to your point, pragmatic ways of how and what it's going to get paid for. So then I understand why the private charities and the private sector is going to go, well, we'll step up and we'll care for mothers. We'll step up and we'll do the child care.
The pro-life movement in particular is they support candidates who fight that stuff legislatively.
Well, the pro-life movement is not a monolith. Like, there's a spectrum there in terms of who they do and don't support. Lila Rose, for example, has never publicly spoken about who she's voted for at all, and she's never advocated.
She'll go on Ali Sucky's podcast.
Okay.
In support. Yeah. That's what I'm that's what I'm trying to say.
And support who? Ali's.
Yeah, like she'll go on as like,
I would go on her podcast. But there's stuff me and her disagree on.
What I'm trying to explain is, I guess, and by the way, sorry, my earpiece is falling out. I understand what you're saying, and I do not find the particular social safety net argument super compelling from what you said for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go through all of them. What I will say is that just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. We do agree that printing more money is a bad idea.
I would say it's more complicated than the narrative we've been given of like, we're just printing money. That's not how a society, that's not how a government functions with their money. But yes,
generally speaking,
we should be wise with how we use our money to the best of our ability.
But generally speaking, the more you just create without a balancing a checkbook, it's not as good for the value of the dollar, i.e. inflation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it for sure. Yeah. I mean, 100%. Like, inflation's a problem. We all know that. Like, I know it's an issue. I feel the effects of it myself.
Cool.
You know,
so. I appreciate you conceding that point.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, anyway, yeah. I'm also not an economist, so I don't want to, again, get too much out of my own lane. But
so is your position like just 100% whatever the woman feels is inside of her and what she wants to do with it is just on her? Like, there should never be regulation?
No, I said earlier that I'm in support of, like, you know, making sure that abortion's access is safe, it's legal. I think that it should be, you know, I think that there should be I think that there should be policies written by medical experts, mainly OBGYNs, right, who are in this world, to say, hey, here's what we see. Here's what we think are really healthy policies that would promote the human flourishing as much as possible, and that would protect women who maybe are in need of an abortion. So,
do you think the act of an abortion is healthy?
What?
Do you think the
It
physical
can be.
act, it could be healthy?
If a woman is about to die,
No, that's that again. For the average person having a viable pregnancy, let me rephrase that. Do you think the act of an abortion against a viable pregnancy is healthy?
do I think an active abortion against a physically healthy to someone?
Yes.
I don't think it would be the healthiest, but
So it's not healthy.
no. What I'm trying, I'm misunderstanding. What are you actually asking me?
I'm asking. You said healthy. I don't think there's anything healthy about an
For
abortion.
the health of the mother is what I said.
If a mother's about to die, that's different.
Okay.
Okay. I'm talking about a
So
viable
what-
pregnancy.
so back to my answer.
So you leave the baby alone. You just leave the baby alone.
Mm-hmm.
It grows into a healthy, functioning. The 6-week-old, the 10-week-old, the 12-week-old, the 20. You just leave it alone, and someone steps in and terminates that pregnancy.
Yeah.
That is not a healthy act.
No, I would agree. It's not.
That is a violent act.
Yeah. It's an
By
act.
definition, it's a violent act.
It's about as violent as any kind of surgery, I guess, right? We're tearing open skin, ripping open flesh.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very
All right.
violent.
So, well, all right. Yeah.
It's not the same as my ACL getting repaired,
Okay.
Tim. It's not the same.
okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
my answer to your question, right? Because you said, do you think it should be unregulated? What I'm saying is that I think the right people who see this stuff, who are medical experts, should be part of writing the policies for how we regulate as a society.
Once upon a time, lobotomies were the right policy.
Uh-huh.
Now we look back at that act as barbaric and absolutely unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the medical consensus can change?
Anything can change.
Okay. So were lobotomies wrong when the medical consensus?
I don't
was
know.
okay?
I wasn't alive when lobotomies were happening.
Okay.
I don't know even how to answer that
Are
question. 'cause
lobotomies
it's
wrong?
like-
Are the frontal lobotomies wrong now?
I have no idea even how a lobotomy even functions, why it came
They
into
go
existence.
in,
what
they
it
do
did.
something
Yeah,
to your
I have
brain
an idea, but
for bipolar
this is
people.
one of the problems I have, not with you, to be clear, because I like you, but one of the problems I have with this kind of content world that we're both a part of is that we have to become like overnight experts on things that like we would never think about.
Sure.
So I just don't know the answer to your question.
That's
I
fair.
just don't know.
That's fair.
And the same thing goes for the abortion conversation. What I'm trying to say is like, my take personally as a voting individual is that I believe that ultimately, okay, if the dichotomy we're placed in right now is you cannot get an abortion for any reason unless you're about to die, or you have the right to get an abortion based on whatever
For any
circumstance is
reason.
happening.
For any reason. That's crazy,
That's
Tim.
not the only take.
How is that not the only take?
Any reason?
Yes.
I just said a second ago, I'm for regulation.
Okay. I missed that. My
Sorry,
I didn't
right?
know you missed that.
No, that's okay,
That's
it's
my
okay.
fault.
What I'm
so
trying
you
to
are
say is,
you
like,
are for certain
I
regulation.
am for the right people writing the right regulations.
Okay.
And I want to be clear about that.
Gotcha.
What I'm
Okay,
not
okay.
for are politicians, right? Writing things that they have no clue what they're talking about.
Okay.
So I'm a big, and this is how I live my life in general. This is how I am with my theology. And this is probably a fallacy. I recognize that, but I am someone who tends to appeal to authority because I know that it becomes very, first off, arrogant. It becomes ignorant when you start talking about things that you're just not an expert on. Right? I am not an OBGYN. I am not a scientist. I cannot answer some of those questions. So my take really right now is actually, it's very simple for me as a human. I say, okay, if the options we are currently faced in our country right now is who has the say in when an abortion happens or why it happens, I would rather that decision be mostly in the hands of the person who's pregnant with their team around them. And I would also support the right people who are experts in this, writing the right regulation to make sure that we're not toying around with, what was the word that we used earlier? About
genetics.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Of course, we want to be wise. We want to be, as Christians, we want to be wise in these decisions. Okay, but that's where I would land. I mean, that's really all there is to it for me.
You pointed to the origins of the pro-life movement. How do you feel about the origins of the pro-choice movement?
What, with the eugenics and
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah, I've read a little bit up on that with, who's it, Margaret Thatcher? Yeah, a lot of
Very,
stuff's been,
very racist, disgusting lady.
it's been pretty debunked, a lot of that stuff though too, man. Yeah, Mark Driscoll did a whole thing on this. I did a deep dive on it. A lot of her takes that we see like out there are not like 100%. But again, I don't know much about her at all because as far as I know, she wasn't a Christian and she doesn't fall into my purview of the work that I do online, right? So I definitely could be wrong there. I have no problem admitting that. But have I done a deep dive on Margaret Thatcher and the pro-choice movement? I guess I have not, to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there was overt evidence that she was a eugenicist who wanted to deplete and decrease the black population.
Yeah, problematic. 100%.
Okay.
Wrong. Bad.
So okay. So
Bad.
well, at least
Boo.
you're consistent. Okay,
Down with
cool.
Margaret. If that's the case.
Sanger.
Sanger. Yeah,
Margaret
I
Sanger.
said Thatcher.
Yeah.
Who is Margaret Thatcher?
I don't know who Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, fact checker.
Zach.
I love
Zach
this
with the
fact checker. I need one of
right?
these in my life. Jeez.
Okay. So this is how I view it.
All right.
If we have to prioritize someone's autonomy over the unborn and all of these other variables that go into decreasing birth rates, right? The trauma on the woman's body after the fact, the very limited studies that even rape victims, the majority of, and they are limited to be fair, but the majority of rape victims end up choosing to keep their baby.
Mm-hmm.
I think I rather prioritize the unborn over the autonomy of the woman because I think the unborn is more vulnerable and I think has less voice, less anything. Having said that, obviously we want to prevent these from ever happening. And there's a myriad of ways that we can get there. My prediction, I think fast forward 50 years from now, abortion is not a thing. The technological breakthroughs have happened. I think people have figured it out one way or another, right? And because they figured it out, this is not an issue. I think we look back at this and we look back at this time as a very dark, barbaric time in our history. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing now is just rationalization and, to your point, appeal to authority and all these different things. But I think fundamentally, like the act, remove the politics. And I think that's a fair point, like politicians making decisions. I think the folks that I'm seeing advocating for these things are mothers themselves. The most active, most lively people in the pro-life movement are women who are mothers. So it's not dudes trying to control the woman's body. It's like a lot of those are tropes. So that's how I would look at it. Is like if we have to prioritize and let's just say we got to pick the lesser of two evils. Women's autonomy and self-actualization, baby's autonomy to a shot at life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all the things that the Constitution. I think I'm prioritizing the unborn baby.
Yeah.
I think that's a more reasonable and consistent take when you factor in life, when you factor in leaving the life alone and not going in doing something to pull that life out. I think that's a more reasonable and consistent take, and it is more coherent with church history and the Bible.
Do you think that abortion is murder?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's obviously there's a spectrum on murder, right? So I think there's if you got a and it's going to sound crazy, so just bear with me, okay? But if you have a 90-year-old that is neglected and then dies, that's murder, right? Versus someone that goes in and kills a 5-year-old, right? And versus someone that kills a 1-year-old. Like there's obviously a spectrum there, right? Of how those are dealt with in the eyes of the law, right? So though I believe abortion is murder because I think it ends an innocent human life, I think that is murder. I think the consequences for that wouldn't be the same as the mother that suffocates her 5-year-old.
It's interesting to me that you think that though, because you made a lot of points about how it's a violent act, how it is murder, all this stuff, and it's I think I'm not sure if you used the word barbaric, but that was kind of the influx I got from you.
I definitely said violent.
Yeah, violent. Yeah. So I mean, I said
barbaric history.
Why
really
should why would the consequence be any different from someone who suffocates a 5-year-old? When
I
think you would argue that you're dismembering a child, right?
Yeah,
it's a big argument.
Absolutely.
So like, why would you be nice to the mother who made that happen?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question, and this is why. And this might sound crazy, and I'm okay. I'll take it on chin.
Okay.
I think because abortion culture is so prevalent, because sexual revolution culture is so prevalent, hookup culture is so prevalent, it's just a fetus. I think that there is a mass indoctrination in this paradigm that I think a lot of times the woman doesn't know what she's done until after the fact.
How about the doctor?
Oh, I think the doctor should totally be charged.
Be charged?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think abortion doctors. I think abortion doctors are evil. They know what they're doing.
So you are flirting with like the abolitionist movement, then?
Oh yeah. For the
Okay.
doctors, not for the mothers though, because I think
but really there isn't. Besides it sounding as shocking as it sounds, there really isn't a good logical argument to make to defend that though. Because if the mother brings her, I'm going to use your language.
Yeah.
The mother brings her baby to an abortion clinic and says, dismember this child because I don't want it anymore, right? And they know what they're doing.
I don't know how any of this is getting monetized, by the way.
Yeah. Right. Sorry.
It's going to be so much editing that needs to be done.
But if that's your take on this, right? Why is your take then, well, The mother was just indoctrinated.
Yeah.
She's aware.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
sentient. She knows what she's doing. She knows what's happening. She's
Yeah.
seen the video that you're talking about. So
No,
why?
because I don't think she's seen the video, and I don't think she knows what she's doing, and I think she's been told it's a clump of cells, and I think there's an entire
But she knows it's
world.
not. It's kicking, right? I mean, in this scenario, the baby might be at
babies kick at 10 weeks.
20 weeks, maybe.
When do babies kick? Can you look that up? When do babies kick?
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Good
I don't
point.
know.
That's a
I
good
don't know,
point.
'cause I don't
But
know what babies kick.
You get my whole point,
Yeah,
though,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm just trying to, because you mentioned.
No, and there's some people
you
that hold
mentioned
that position, and they would say that's the more consistent position.
Well, this is the abolitionist movement, right? And to be fair, I would totally concede that they are a more fringe movement than the pro-life thing, but they are actively fighting for legislation that would both give the death penalty to mothers and doctors.
Yeah.
And so I'm just
I
wondering your
would
takes
disagree
on
with
that.
It says earliest 16 weeks, late and 24 weeks.
Yeah, that's late, man.
16 weeks.
16 to 24 weeks. That's late. I would say. We know that feticide. I think that's how you say the word feticide.
Infanticide.
Well, infanticide is different than
That's like, yeah, that's post.
So feticide is the destruction, abortion of a fetus. So we know that feticide is illegal under all circumstances, right? Like if a woman punches herself in the stomach, if she throws herself down some stairs,
yeah.
if a man kicks a woman in the stomach and she miscarries the baby, like that's illegal on all grounds.
Death penalty for her?
Well,
should be charged?
let me flesh out the thought. If she's murdered and she's pregnant, that's double murder, right? And so I think if feticide is completely illegal in all circumstances, I think it's crazy to be like, yeah, but we're gonna make this exception for this doctor who can go in and commit feticide because he's an authority and he has special tools. Like that sounds crazy. That just doesn't sound coherent to me.
Yeah, but
You
how
know?
about for the mother, though? Like if the mother does that.
So I think there's a spectrum there. Like to be fair, I think there's a spectrum there. I think
Interesting.
a woman saying, and I think this is legal in Colorado, though rare, but a woman at 36 weeks saying, my mental health is at risk if I have this baby, let's kill it. Like that's a different level of debauchery than a woman at 6 weeks who has been told her entire life that it's your body, your choice, it's a clump of cells, it's inconsequential, this isn't going to have any effect. This is actually empowering to you. I think that's a totally different end of the spectrum, right? I just think that is.
Okay, so for you, some women could face charges depending on the situation.
Sure. Someone could face charges.
Yikes, dude.
Yeah.
Yikesies.
Depending on the situation. You don't like that. That makes you uncomfortable.
Of course it does. I mean, this is the abolition move. This is welcome to Christian nationalism, bro.
So what is it that makes the baby special when it goes through the canal? Like what is it like at 39 weeks it could potentially be okay if her mental health is at stake? And again, I know I'm talking about the exceptions to the rule, right? Which you did earlier with the rape victim, right? 39 weeks, baby's in there. I believe in Colorado. I'm emotionally distressed. This is going to ruin my mental health. Cool with the baby. Yet at post 40 weeks when the baby's here, it's you can't do that anymore.
Well, I think one of the things is the first breath.
So the breath is what gives the baby a right.
I'm just answering your question from what I think people might answer that. I mean, I know in some other religious traditions, the first breath is when a human is formed. It's when the first breath is taken. I mean, you can look at Genesis, right? I mean, man breathed into God the breath of life, or God breathed into man the breath of life. You know, the idea is that breath is what gives you life to become human. Again, this is way out of.
I appreciate
I'm just being
you
honest,
answering.
just being way out of my depth
You're
here.
not an expert,
you know?
and this is something.
And
that,
I just like, yeah.
to be fair, there's much better debates about this.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
Trent Horn versus Destiny had an amazing back and forth on this. Destiny's position is a little different than yours. He believes
who is Destiny? You keep talking about this dude.
Destiny
is it a guy or a girl? I don't know.
Destiny's a dude.
Okay, hi Destiny.
He's a really really good debater. He's an ex-Catholic turned atheist, agnostic leftist debater who's pro-choice, and so he's had a couple of these conversations. One of them was a complete dumpster fire. Lila Rose did a great job, but there was a lady with her that was a little rough. And then so they had a part 2, and it was him versus Trent Horn for about 3 hours. His position is consciousness. The cutoff is consciousness for him. You know, when a baby is at 20 to 24 weeks, it's conscience. There's brain waves, yada yada yada, and so he thinks the cutoff should be there. No abortion before then.
Interesting.
So that's why I was asking, like, what is it?
I feel, and this is not a knock at you.
Sure.
I just feel it's like a weird conversation for me to have. I'm just like, yeah, I have my experience with being my partner. I'm glad that we had the option if it came to that, and so that has informed like how I see some of this policy stuff. I fully acknowledge that this stuff can be like really complicated and that it can get like, where are the moral boundaries?
Sure.
I recognize all of that, you
Sure.
know, but ultimately with our current climate, I'm someone who says I trust the family and the pregnant person more than I trust the government mandating a blanket of take on how they manage that part of the woman's healthcare. I can say, so that's just where I landed with it.
And do you think that if a woman does something to cause her own miscarriage, that she should be caught? Like if a woman is intentionally consuming exorbitant amounts of alcohol and cocaine, and then that forces the abortion, like, do you think that's okay?
I hope it never got to that, dude. It's just like, I would hope that we would be so far. I hope that would never come to an actual situation.
But that would be okay.
I don't know. I mean, what's the context here? You know,
she likes to party, bro. Come on, man. She's sexually liberated.
If someone, come on, dude. Not everyone who is sexually liberated does that kind of stuff. I would need to think about it more, to be honest with you. I just don't really know. I got to think about it.
I think you intrinsically know it would be wrong.
I think it depends on the context.
I think this is what I think. This is just,
if a woman's in China, right, and is pregnant with no, that's a bad example. I thought I had that.
You ever seen the one child policy movie in China?
I might have, dude.
It's on Amazon. It's such an interesting movie. This is totally not something I care to talk about, but it's such a fascinating movie because it talks about up until 2015, they limited to one child, and there would be forced abortions.
Yes.
Very, very, very dark. Like, the movie's very, 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 very dark. All of this has since backfired on China because of their decreasing birth rates, which eventually will happen in America if we keep going down this route of low birth rates, right? To just from to your standpoint, a safety net infrastructure standpoint, right? If there's not workers to take care of the older workers, to take care of the retired, and our population is not always at least maintaining, it could be catastrophic for the infrastructure of a society. And that's what they're experiencing right now. Long story short, this documentary is I thought it was like, dude, this is like the best pro-life documentary I've ever seen. This is amazing, right? And they're talking to abortion doctors that are like, I can't believe I did this. Like, this was so awful, blah, blah, blah. There's a kid in a jar, bro. It's dark.
Yikes.
And the entire thing ends with this like graphic of like, women should still have the choice. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is craziness to me. That the entire documentary is railing against low birth rates, against being forced to have abortions, all these things, right? And anyway, so
I think that is the point, though, right? Isn't that the point, though, that like the problem with China is that they're forcing women to do something?
Yes,
that's the whole point. So I think that like that's why people are like, and this is why I say, like, for me, it's about having the choice to make a decision that I don't need to know the answer to, because it's not my job to make that decision. That's all I'm getting at. I don't think the state should compel people to have abortions. Of course not. I think that would be really unethical and terrible. I also don't think that the state should be so limited where people who might actually need one are not able to get one, or because of our failure to actually give people what they need to maintain their own, I guess, pregnancy cycle, they should have access to that. I think that's just kind of where I
were you pro vaccine mandates?
Yes, I was.
How was that different?
How's what different?
How are my buddies who had already had COVID and they were RNs and they almost lost their jobs, and because they were trying to mandate them and they had to get religious exemptions and write letters and all this stuff? How is that different? They had the bodily autonomy. They wanted to make a choice for themselves and their family.
Yeah, but COVID can spread to other people. I know you're going to argue that abortion kills someone. I get that. That's the whole argument.
You don't think a culture of abortion and a culture
that's
of
what
sexual
I'm saying
revolution?
is like we disagree on the whole premise. So I know what you're saying. I just disagree on the whole bottom line premise of what you're trying to get at. Because the vaccine mandate, which by the way is normal, we've done it many times in this country, not something new at all, was designed to stop a global pandemic that killed over 1 million people in the U.S. It is common for even right now in our military, you want to go to the military? Get vaccinated. Okay,
for sure.
Right. So this argument,
but even folks with natural immunity that were called heroes on the front lines?
This argument became convenient when it was used as a political rhetoric point to somehow talk about the abortion issue. They are night and day for many, many different reasons.
You don't think it's a bit hypocritical though to say, "Hey, I know you already had it. I know you had natural immunity, which they found out was good. Natural immunity is good. You're a frontline worker. We were calling you a hero." But now your entire livelihood is at risk if you don't want to get this shot. By the way, and I told you this privately, and I've said it publicly.
Yeah.
You know, I'm vaccinated.
Yeah.
I got the J&J, and then I got a booster.
Right.
Okay. But you don't think that's how is that consistent? That doesn't seem consistent.
A hospital mandating that their workers get vaccinated during a global pandemic where they're next to COVID all day is like unethical.
When they've already had the vaccine. I mean, when they've already had COVID. They've had COVID. They have the natural immunity for it.
Okay.
So they're already going to fight off the virus because they've had it.
But they can still pass it.
Okay.
The whole point is
vaccinated people can pass it. That's already been debunked.
I
you
know
that.
But it was designed. The whole idea was that the more people are vaccinated, the quicker and less severe the symptoms are, and the less they're out of work, and the less they're able to pass it on going forward.
But they could pass it
So
on.
it was like that's why they had the boosters. It was continuing to kind of defend against it.
How many boosters did you get?
I think I got one. I don't know, one or two.
I'm glad. I was gonna lose it. Dude, there was like 4.
Okay, well, I mean,
there's a lot of boosters.
We're from abortion to COVID vaccines. Jesus, I mean,
I don't want to talk about COVID vaccines.
Thank you. You're talking about things that I do not talk about ever on my content.
All I'm saying is there just seems to be a double standard with that specific issue.
Okay,
that's all I'm saying.
Fine.
And I think a lot of people would be like, "Yo, this is kind of goofy." Like,
listen, man, I told you this during break. Like, I am not someone who argues with people online.
Yeah.
So, like, even my DMs, I get this stuff. I'm like, okay, like, hey, hold the view that you want to hold. I mean, it is what it is, you know?
Okay.
It's not my thing.
So, fair enough. I think, I get it. Okay. So, talk to me about Christian nationalism.
Thank God. Something I actually know something about.
And how the Trump thing flipped you. The Trump thing flipped you.
Totally flipped me.
Okay. So I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't think he was helpful in terms of the rhetoric. I thought Hillary was an awful choice as well. I thought Biden was an awful choice as well. But I didn't vote for Trump. And some people really jumped out the window with the Trump stuff. And it got really weird in terms of the Trump prophecies and a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man.
I think some of Trump's policies were decent. I think a lot of his execution and how he carried himself and communicated just wasn't helpful. But I tend to be more conservative leaning, and I've been
you're fair about that.
Yeah, I've been more conservative leaning especially over the years. So talk to me about like what was specific about Trump. Was it just like the blind support by evangelicals for him, even though there was all these things that clearly he wasn't a Christian, clearly he arguably wasn't even a Republican, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we need to be clear before I even I'm going to just preface by saying conservative and Trump are not the same thing. Trump is its own, he's his own brand of authoritarianism and populism, which is not the typical conservative take in America. I mean, they have been prone to it, but not like this. So me saying that I don't like Trump or Trumpism is not me saying I think conservatives are automatically bad people.
Okay.
You know, so we need to make sure that we're clear about like our terminology here. The Trump thing for me was shocking in 2015 when here I am, back to my story I talked about maybe an hour ago now. You know, I'm committed to Jesus. I've been taught like here's the sexual ethics you need to have. Like here's the way you do it. Here's what it means to be a good man. I'm reading Wild at Heart. I have the Braveheart sword. You know, like I'm into it, right? I want to be a man of integrity and passion. And you know, when the world tells me to move, I plant my feet and say, no, you move to me. That was kind of what I was given.
I wish I knew this Tim a bit more.
What?
The older Tim. I would have been fun to know you as that
too. Trump comes on the scene. I'm more tuned into politics than ever before, right? I grew up on talk radio my whole life, so I grew up on Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh. And I'm like, okay, I'm watching the primary. I'm like, oh, this John Kasich guy, I kind of like him. He seems pretty reasonable and like he's well spoken. And okay, Ted Cruz, maybe not my favorite, but okay. And I'm like, oh, there's Trump. He's a complete joke. Like he's gonna go nowhere, you know, kind of thing. And then I remember people like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin being like, Trump is an imposter. He's a grifter. Like stay away. So I'm like, yeah, I agree. We'll stay away. And then he really rose, quickly. And I watched slowly, I started watching evangelicals, either ones that I knew of, like Jerry Falwell Jr., or others started throwing their support behind it. I'm like, oh, that's really weird. Like he's kind of a bully. He's kind of brutal. Yeah. He doesn't seem to really embody like this Christian ethic that I was.
You know who was the worst at this, bro? Was John MacArthur. Like, did you hear like the initial thing he said? And
I've covered it. I've covered it, bro.
That was the most
covered it.
Oh my gosh, you just got right in line, didn't you, bud?
Oh boy, right in line.
Oh man, that was brutal.
So the moment for me, that was the jaw-dropping moment. And again, I'm gonna make it clear to your audience, like I was pretty conservative in every way. I was conservative more politically. I was pro-life. I was not affirming at the time. You know, Trump has these leaked tapes of him bragging about like sexually assaulting a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my, I'm like repulsed. I mean, I think we all were. As I thought we all were. And I'm like, oh, this guy, this is it. Like,
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap, dude. Yeah. I was not that old, but I remember Bill Clinton. I remember the evangelical
Monica
take.
Lewinsky
Yeah, you know, hey,
thing,
how can we trust someone in the White House who can't lead his family? I'm like, this dude is toast.
Yep.
And then I kind of got giddy for a minute. I'm like, ooh, maybe we'll form our own like third party and we'll like do our own evangelical thing. Like this could be big. And then the quote, we need a commander in chief, not a pastor in chief. And I was like, wait a second. Hold the phone. I'm like, wait. And then I'm watching people on my Facebook, people who raised me in church, you know, like, no, Trump's the guy. And then I started posting how I couldn't vote for him. Yeah. And then they were mad at me. And I'm like, wait. Let me make sure I understand. You're mad at me that I can't vote for the guy on the cover of Playboy magazine.
And you're still a conservative at this point.
Definitely. I'm definitely conservative moderate maybe at this point, but definitely, I mean, like I said.
Like you're paying attention to the GOP debates.
Totally.
Up to it.
Yeah, I mean, Hillary was a total write-off. I voted third party in 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no interest in Hillary or anyone in that field.
As did I.
And so I'm just like, wait, guys, let me make sure I understand you. You're mad at me because I can't vote for the guy that you taught me to be nothing like as a Christian.
Wow.
You're telling me that I'm jettisoning my integrity when you're the ones who's shifting. I'm not shifting right now. Yeah. You're shifting.
That's good.
And so I watched my entire tradition over 2016, 2020 just become like the argument was we're just holding our nose. Yeah, that was a bunch of bullshit. Because by 2018, it was like, he's a new Cyprus. He's a Cyrus. He's a new Cyrus. This is our candidate. Trump is draining the swamp. And I'm like, whoa. Like, guys, he's calling nations shithole countries. Like, this is not even like, this is not normal.
Not remotely classy.
And also like a Muslim ban. Like, again, I'm conservative. I was there during 9/11. Okay, I know all the rhetoric, but I'm like, I mean, even George Bush was way more like, hey, let's make sure not to be extreme and not to villainize people. And Trump's just like, Muslim ban. I'm like, this sounds very anti-American. So he really shifted, and he is what I say it was the stench that I couldn't ignore in what I call the basement of evangelicalism. I was like, no. Something is wrong here. You radicalized me to be a Jesus follower. I'm reading the Sermon on the Mount like you taught me, and I'm comparing notes. It ain't adding up. It ain't adding up. The policies we're advocating for ain't adding up. I'm not getting it. So,
what do you remember? What specific policies you didn't like?
I didn't like the brashness of drain the swamp. I didn't like Trump's take that everyone was the enemy but him. I hated the lying. The lying is what got me.
The lying.
The lying. He lied so much.
Those aren't really policies.
Sorry.
Your issues with Trump or my issues with Trump?
My bad. Let me be clear. I mean, the Muslim ban policy. There's one I didn't like. You know.
Gotcha.
It was honestly the problem with the Trump era in my mind is like we were so focused on his Twitter. Yeah. And like what he was saying that it's like, what did he actually do? Yeah. You know, and like I know he passed some tax cut stuff that I'm like whatever, not really my thing. That's pretty Republican.
He tried to come with the platinum plan for reunifying Black communities and creating these opportunity zones.
Okay,
and there's some actually really good stuff in there. Ice Cube got behind that.
Oh, did he?
Surprisingly, yeah. and he got in a lot of trouble. So I'm with you. And so it's like the good policies that he did present would oftentimes just be completely ignored because of his rhetoric and
also his immorality. Yeah, and he's covering up, lying about sleeping with a porn star. Yeah. But really, 2019, the election of 2020, that was when, in my mind, all the people who I listened to, I didn't believe, oh, he's authoritarian, he's fascist. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? He's racist. I don't see it. And then 2019 happened. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is lying out of his teeth. He is supported by a right-wing media empire that is pushing blatantly false things that are not steeped in reality.
2019, you said?
Yeah, like the election being stolen.
Gotcha.
You know? And then January 6th. And I'm like, who are these people with Christian flags and Bibles and Bible verses storming our damn Capitol building? Who are these people? Where do they come from?
Yeah, that wasn't a good look.
Right. And then we find out now that it was actually way more organized than this spontaneous group. And then I watch people in these right-wing media circles now start defending it. Oh, they were just tourists. Oh, they're downplaying it. Yeah. And so I'm giving you a big picture overview of like, if there's anything that has radicalized me even more, it has been watching my own tradition completely bow the knee to Trump. I mean, literally, Trump took them up on the mountain, said, I'll give you the kingdom, just bow the knee and kiss the ring. They go, no problem, done. We'll bow the ring, bow the knee. We'll kiss the ring. We'll become your biggest fans. We will disseminate your views throughout our churches. No problem, dude. The biggest church in Dallas, in Texas, Robert Jeffrey's church, huge mega church, had Trump speak for their Christmas service.
Wow.
On Sunday morning, where Trump gave a politicized garbage propaganda speech. That's empire.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, a lot of my takes and my views have shifted because I'm like, I don't want to be whatever the hell that is. I need to find better paths forward that I think, in my opinion, are more rooted in the way of Jesus.
Do you think if he was more classy and less like abrasive, and say like the Muslim ban didn't happen, do you think he would have? You think you would have went the direction you did? Like let me just. We talked about Vivek, right?
Yeah, Vivek. Yeah.
And so like similar policies, a bit more flippant with the way he talks about policy wise, but on the surface he's a very likable guy. He's very charismatic. He's slick. He's smooth. Do you think like if it was Vivek instead of Trump, you would have felt the same way?
It's
a good question.
I
right?
was concerned about a lot of things before Trump. I even back in the day when I was, again, unaffirming, a lot of my blogs, my early blogs, were like, why are we yelling at gay people all the time? Why are we so rude to gay people? I had a friend of mine who worked at Starbucks. He's like, dude, when I was 13, I came up to my pastor, said I was struggling with my sexuality. He called me an abomination, said never to come back.
No.
Swear to God, dude.
Wow.
I'm like, holy moly. So
That's
I was
awful.
having some doubts in general with my own tradition.
Yeah.
And I think Trump was like the cherry on top. And then, of course, I think the COVID response overall, I wasn't thrilled with. The Black Lives Matter response. You know, watching pastors I know sharing Candace Owens' talking points about the murder of George Floyd. I'm like, guys, are we Christians? Are we on the side of like empathy and justice and grace, or are we not? Like, what are we doing here? So I think all those elements really kind of combined to be just like something is way wrong in my tradition.
Yeah.
And that's when I started TNE.
And so when would you say the deconstruction happened? And what is your overall sense? Because I think there's certain folks that I would say deconstruct some of the cultural elements of Christianity, some of the things that maybe do need to be deconstructed and then reconstruct, and it's good. And then some folks completely deconstruct and then deconvert or deconstruct and would kind of land where you land, where you hold some, I don't know, I guess heterodox views in terms of queer affirming and you know, the inerrancy of scripture and those sorts of things. Like, what do you make of all of that? Is that came around that time, the deconstruction?
Yeah, well, I mean, I discovered the term deconstruction after I started the New Evangelicals. So I was still serving at my church in 2020.
Okay.
During the pandemic, they were really good. They were masked up. We followed all distancing guidelines.
And this is in the Philly area?
Yeah, Philly area, like New Jersey suburb.
Gotcha.
And I was drumming. You know, we were making our online services. And again, there's a lot here. Like I said earlier, I've had concerns about church culture in general. Sure. But I was still there. Yeah. And so I started TNE in 2020 on Instagram and was like, hey, anyone else thinking about this stuff? Yeah. Boom. Then I discovered the term deconstruction. I discovered the word evangelical.
Now, were you queer affirming at that point?
No, but I was like, my take at that moment was like, can't we just agree to disagree? Like, isn't it like, can't we just welcome people in? Even if we don't see these passages the same way, can't we just make room? So that was kind of my take at the time, you know. But I was having more and more concerns, you know, and more reservations. And I wasn't finding the arguments I used to hold as compelling as maybe some new thoughts. So I was definitely in transition. So the term deconstruction, you know, it is not a monolithic thing. It is definitely what I call an explosion. People are going in all different directions, even though maybe the origin point is similar. Some people, to your point, do walk out. They say, I'm out of this house we call it Christianity. Get me the hell out of here. And based on their experience, what I've heard from them, I'm like, hey, man, I get it. I think God's big enough. Like, you know what? God's big enough. He's bigger than me. God can handle it. I trust it. It's not my job to try and convince you to stay in this house that really, you know, you've been breathing in toxic fumes for so long. But the work that we do as an organization, right? We are definitely sympathetic. I would say even myself, like maybe a better way of putting it is the dam broke open in 2021. That was when like all the thoughts I've been having for years just started clicking in a different way. And I was like, oh yeah, like this is much more compelling for me at this point, right? But it was always about, and still is, how do I understand the Jesus tradition? How do I understand the historical church? How do I understand our moment here? How do I understand the Bible? What actually is the Bible? How do we get our Bible, right? How do we view these things? Where is this stuff coming from? So my whole thing is all about like what I call renegotiating faith, but it's all in the hopes of helping people find their faith again. The analogy we use is we've been in the basement and now we're kind of on the first floor and we're like, oh my God, this house is way bigger in the Christian tradition than I ever thought. I want to explore some of these rooms. So a lot of the content we do is like, we'll bring on a scholar about A, B, C, D, or E and kind of have them walk us through what's the Black liberation tradition teach us? You know, what can James Cone teach us about oppression and like in these dynamics through his lens of Black liberation theology? Where do we get our more modern Reformed theology from? Like asking those kinds of questions just to understand, right? And then people who we bring through, some might say, hey, I'm really attracted to this type of theology. I want to park here. And we go, great, we're all about it. Like enjoy it, enjoy the journey. So that's kind of more of like the work that we do, as well as, of course, advocating for accountability inside the evangelical church.
But not outside of the evangelical space. Meaning like you're probably not going to have like an Armenian apostolic dude come on. And
I definitely would.
You would, but what if he's not queer affirming?
We would definitely have him speak.
Oh, you would have to speak.
Oh yeah,
okay.
we've had people speak before who aren't affirming.
Catholics,
Yeah,
Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah, because the whole point is, right, instead of this position of is it right or is it wrong? It's more of like, can we just approach with curiosity? Can we just say, hey, I might not agree with you, Mr. Priest, sir. I don't know what you call it.
We call him Der Khair.
Okay. I'm not sure I would agree with all your stuff, but I would love to learn more about your tradition.
Interesting.
Where does it come from? How do you see it this way? How do you get these views? How would you view original sin, for example, right?
Okay.
So it just helps people get some fresh air and realize, like, the thing that we're a part of is way bigger.
Yeah, I think, interesting enough, because obviously we're going to disagree on a lot of this stuff, but I think having a more robust view of the faith, I think, is definitely healthy.
Yeah.
And I think I coming back to what we started with is like in my exploration of that, I just landed at the same core essentials. Like when I went to Israel, Jerusalem is broken up into 4 quarters: the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, which is like the Christian Catholic quarter, and then the Armenian Apostolic quarter. And being there, bro, and seeing the diversity, seeing all of these different folks, seeing all the different traditions, seeing my people have a quarter of the old city you couldn't really even go through unless you knew someone that was Armenian, was very helpful to see how multi-ethnic and big Christianity was, And I think that is healthy. I think a lot of times. So my advice be when we start talking about deconstruction, my advice for folks a lot of times is like, bro, go sit with like some Ethiopian Christians. Go sit with some Coptic Christians. Go sit with these other traditions and talk to them and get to know them, and you'll be shocked. But a lot of times you kind of end up at the same place you started in terms of theology, if we're talking about all the different arms of the church, right? Not on the minutia of the canon or the minutia of original sin, but in the broad strokes aspects. I think people land at the same fate.
Yeah, but I'll put it this way: in my faith tradition, canon and original sin,
those were up there.
They're make or break, dude. Did you from original sin? You're not a Christian. That's how I grew up.
So in terms of original sin, you mean like total depravity versus original sin?
Totally.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Do you think that? Because this is the pattern I see.
Go ahead.
Folks who grow up in a very stringent, fundamental environment, and maybe they don't even know they're fundamental. Like maybe they don't know that they're 2 clicks away from Westboro Baptist. You know what I mean? And so they grow up with this, and then like those are the folks that I see deconstructing the most. Is folks that like they were super Calvinist, and I'm like, hey, man, and I'm calling them like, hey, this really happened with a very influential Christian. Hey man, like, what's up with this whole like Calvinism thing? Are you like a 5-point Calvinist? Because like this limited atonement thing is kind of crazy. And it's like, crazy. And the response was, dude, I'm a 1,000-point Calvinist. Right? I'll tell you who this was offline.
Okay, I gotta know. I'm dying.
And like,
I'm a 1,000-point Calvinist.
But bro, fast forward 5-6 years later, and they're like, man, resurrection? I don't know. And it seems like the folks that go to like the I don't know if that's fringe, but it's something. It's not nothing, as Jordan Peterson would say. It's something that folks that go into these more like fundamentalist binary levels of thinking about everything, not 10 things, but everything, right? Young Earth creationism, your canon having to be the only canon. Like it seems like that avatar becomes the likelihood for someone to deconvert or deconstruct.
Well, it definitely, I will put it this way. I will speak for me and the organization, because I can't speak for other people who are in this space, right? Sure. But we often say that we don't want to become fundamentalists all over again.
That's the vibe I get, man.
Now, that being said, okay, here's what's tricky about this, right? I think one of the presuppositions that we have when we talk about like theology and even the Christian tradition is we think we're almost like doing the scientific method approach, you know, where it's like, hey, if we could just put in this formula, here's the objective reality of this. And like, there's a reason why we have 1,000 different theology departments and people from all different walks of life debating what we think this stuff says versus like there being no flat earth, like, you know, places in academic circles.
Oh, bro.
In academic circles.
Okay, in academic
right?
circles.
That's what I'm saying.
You know that's back.
No, I know
you know
it's
that's back in a lot of Christian circles, right? The firmament and all that stuff, bro.
Dude.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to get triggered, okay? But my point is that, like, in academia, right, no one's like, flat earth, right? Because we have a scientific method that we can use.
Sure.
Theology is not science.
Sure.
It's a different kind of conversation, right? It's much more malleable, I think, to me.
Sure.
And there's a lot of ingredients that go into even how we form our moral ethics. Like, we are sitting on certain philosophical norms that come to us by Greek philosophy and stuff that help shape those things. So I think that for people like myself, maybe I didn't understand that. And so for the first time, I am like kind of picking apart those threads and just kind of examining them and kind of rethinking like, okay, how did I come to this conclusion before? And is it the same or has it changed? Like, for example, the physical resurrection, right? I think, and I actually interviewed Sean McDowell about this. And I had him on the podcast and I was like, Sean, let me ask you a question. I was like, would you say that the physical resurrection is an objective verified fact? That like just definitely happened no matter what? He's like, no. I go, what, Sean? But you're like a conservative apologist. And the way I always thought about the resurrection was that it was this historical thing that definitely happened, that if you don't believe, you're just crazy. He's like, no, it's not that black and white. And he acknowledged that, hey, there is some element of like, we do trust something that does sound outlandish, right? That was not how that was taught to me.
Really?
Right? No.
Okay. So this is the difference. So it just came to me. This is the difference.
Tell me.
I came to the faith reading Josh McDowell's book. Like, I came to the faith with that paradigm. I didn't come to the faith with this absolutist approach. I never that just, bro. I grew up Armenian Apostolic, but we stopped going to church because my mom and my dad split, and then my dad got remarried in the church, so my mom hated the church. So I stopped going. And then when I did go back, there was some essay that happened by some of the other altar boys. And then when I did go back again, it was strictly for social reasons. So there was no like, and then I was like, God doesn't exist. And if he does, he does not like me, right? And so when I came back to the faith, it was a 2-year process of literally asking all the questions about the resurrection, about is Jesus God, is he eternal, homosexuality, all the questions. And so I spent 2 years, sophomore year, all of my junior year, just poking everything I could, and then finally came down to like I would say a fairly robust faith, and sitting down with my terchayed from the Armenian Apostolic Church. So I never came with this like facts, bro. Like, it was never that. It was like this. Let me tell me what you think about this.
Yeah, tell me.
There's enough there that I can have a reasonable trust and confidence that Jesus rose from the grave, and I believe that the New Testament is reliable. And I believe that because Jesus spoke about certain things in the Old Testament, I believe those things are reliable. And I put my faith and my confidence in that as a confidence spectrum. And then after I give my life to Jesus, something supernatural happened that I can't explain it to you, but I know that all of a sudden, man, sleeping with my girlfriend, that was fun. Now it wasn't fun anymore. I was repulsed by the act. Getting high, couldn't do it anymore. Right? Something happened. And all the things I used to hate, like going to church and being around Christians, because I just thought they were just completely cornballs. All of a sudden I desired those things. And then I started living out God's ways. I started living my life the way Jesus would prescribe. I stopped having sex with my girlfriend. I stopped smoking weed. I stopped doing all these things. And then I waited until marriage, until I got married. And then all of a sudden I started reading Proverbs, and I started handling my money God's ways. And I started taking care of my body God's ways. And I started doing all these things based on what I'm reading from the scriptures. And then in hindsight, I look back 20 years later, and I am certain. I'm certain about my own experience. But the certainty came not at looking at the fact of the resurrection. It looked at this seems reasonable and trustworthy, and I could place my confidence in this. I could place my trust in this. In the same way I could place my trust that my wife's not out with another dude right now. I have enough confidence there, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what she's doing right now, but I have enough confidence. And then in hindsight, 15 years later, I go, bro, I got a great marriage. My marriage is awesome. We have a great sex life. We have a great family. Our finances are, and all of this is because we did it. What I would say is historically God's ways. That's how it's always made sense to me. The certainty doesn't come from the blind faith or the faith aspect. The certainty comes from the hindsight of living out the faith for decades. In the same way, if I'm reading 5 love languages and how to communicate with your spouse and all these books about marriage, and then I apply these things and I go, oh, no. There is a tried and true way of how to do marriage correctly, and it's not absolutist and that it's always going to work, but there's some general principle that if we were to talk about marriage, you'd be like, yeah, like communicate and share your feelings and don't always share your feelings. You know what I mean? Like, you see what I'm saying? So that's how it's always made sense for me. And so that makes a lot of sense though.
I think listen, let me just say that I think that's a really great story. I think it's powerful. I think it's an experience that means a lot to you and that you should have all of that. Like, I'm not going to critique any part of that, you know, because that's your life and that's really beautiful. I think what I would say to that is like, can you also make room that other people had a different experience and maybe also found a way of living fully for them that works, even if it looks a little bit different than what your ingredients look like. I think that's kind of my rub with some people who I see in these spaces, not necessarily you, but like in this more like we have to respond to deconstruction. Oh, don't deconstruct this way. It's like, why do you feel the need to tell people, hey, your experience definitely isn't as valid as what I'm telling you is definitely truth. So assimilate into this or else. I think that's what's frustrating for me is like, you know, people have experienced, and we both agree here, some serious major harm, especially women. Most of my followers are women. 70% of our Instagram followers are women. I hear their stories every day in my
terms
DMs.
of like essay, or like what would you say? Like, what do you mean by major harm?
Oh, it could be SA. It could be, SA is one of the big ones. It could be verbal.
Essay and it getting swept under the rug.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's awful.
I get a lot of stories of like, hey, I was on staff at a church for a long time. I said one thing on social media that was a little more progressive. I was canned. You know, things like that.
Yeah.
I just talked to someone else today who was a male about his experience being both the one doing the harm, but then also the one experiencing harm and the complexity of that, right? So I am working with people and talking to people and in community with people who are like, I did all the right things the right way. I was that golden child, and it still wasn't enough for my faith community. Or on top of that, this abuse was still hidden underneath the rug. You know,
in terms of your personal experience, there was abuse, like within your church community, or what?
You're asking me personally?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying the stories I get told from people. Got it.
But wouldn't you say that the way you lived? How old were you when you got married?
25.
Okay, so you got married 25.
26, yeah.
I'm assuming you guys did the Christian dating thing to some degree.
Yep,
I'm assuming you weren't out here just smashing left and right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that there was some inklings of the very things you did that actually benefited you, even though they came from convoluted waters?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
But they're not the only source, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
You know, like I have plenty of friends who were never Christian who got married and have a great marriage. Like they didn't get married in the church. They didn't hold a sex before marriage. Sure. You know, like they had sex before they were married. And they live fine. Like they are happy and they're content.
Yeah, I guess
that's all I'm trying to say. Is
I guess what I'm saying, like if someone deconstructs and then they deconstruct to the point where their entire paradigm changes. And now they're pulling from postmodernity and how there's no objective truth. And now it's like, well, we're just highly evolved animals. Like, what's it matter if I go rack up 100-person body count and just have 100 partners, right? What if I cheat on my wife? Why does it matter? Like there are people that get to those places too, right? Like,
okay, so let's
see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, let's get again. I'm going to talk to you about what I experienced and I've heard many times.
Sure.
And are there some people who might use the term deconstruction to cause harm to people, like cheating on their spouse? Yeah. Sure, and that's
or maybe not their spouse.
Maybe
they go on and up their notch count into the 3 digits because they feel sexually liberated.
Okay,
that's self-destructive. That's harmful to oneself, and it's harmful to the community that they're engaging with.
I've never heard of such an example.
You've never heard of someone that's deconverted and ran up their watch count?
I have never met someone in 3 years of doing this fielding 10,000 plus DMs. I've never had a conversation like that.
Really?
I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Okay.
I'm just telling you.
I got a couple guys you got to meet.
I'm sure. But what I'm trying to say is that the spaces I occupy, right, are mostly from people who have experienced legitimate church abuse and trauma.
Okay.
And they are trying to pick up the pieces of what do they believe about this God that they were told certain things about that maybe did not live up to that expectation at all. And maybe they were all in at their church experienced a ton of abuse. It was swept underneath the rug, and now they're trying to pick up the pieces. Or maybe they were part of the SBC who covered up a decade of sexual abuse.
Had a list of 700
right.
people.
And again, here's the problem for a lot of people like myself now with evangelical spaces. They're not accountable. People do bad things. People often tell me, you just want perfection. No, we want accountability.
Okay.
Right? When you do something messed up in your marriage, if you did not own it, if you were like, no, it's your fault. No, it wasn't what you thought. That's not healthy for anyone.
Totally.
And so when you have people who put themselves in a position of spiritual authority, they claim to be a communicator that understands the Bible, knows the truth of God's word, right? Yes. And they misuse that platform for their own personal benefit at the expense of someone in their congregation. And that's swept underneath the rug by the bigger organization. Or worse than that, the victim is blamed, right? These are serious things,
no, that's
right?
Fair. That's fair.
And so like,
I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying.
I'm not saying you are. I get passionate about this because I think so many people have said things about folks who are deconstructing and just put them in the worst possible light.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, first off, deconstruction is not a movement. It's not monolithic. There is no leaders to this thing. And a lot of people want to stay faithful to Jesus. In fact, many are having a crisis of theology, not a crisis of faith. That's a huge difference.
Interesting.
You know, I never doubted if God existed. But I doubted, what do I believe about this God? Is the God I believe in predestining people for heaven or hell no matter what? Is my brother who's not a Christian just damned no matter what he does because God has predetermined it? That is no longer, I can no longer, work with that idea of God. Something has to change.
I got you.
Right? So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess here's what I've seen from folks who've deconstructed, people in my real life, is that
they use the term deconstructed?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Everything goes out the window. Everything goes out the window, right? And so it's almost like it starts by something that was perhaps bona fide church hurt, and then everything is picked out, and then you're just acting self-destructively at that point. You know what I mean? And a lot of times it can lead to further addiction, right? So now we're swapping things out for other vices, So religion to them, they already had trauma in their childhood. Religion becomes a vice of sorts, and they go super radical, and then they just swap that out, and then they're doing other things that are self-destructive.
Sure.
And that to me is what becomes alarming and concerning.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when people, and I have to draw a caricature because I don't know your friends, but I can say like there are definitely people that I probably have encountered that grew up maybe very repressed, right? Very like sheltered, we can say, and like maybe had questions but suppressed it, or did all the right things. They either got betrayed or something happened that essentially the rubber band got released, right? Sure. And now they're just in like a spiral of like, well, if I couldn't do anything, I might as well do it all, right? And just because someone ends up in a different space than where they were doesn't mean that it's inherently automatically healthier, right? Obviously.
Okay.
Right? But I think where we would disagree is that I'm much more tolerant, I think, of like, I understand how someone can go from, I say myself for marriage. We got divorced because our marriage completely imploded. Now I'm single, and now I'm open to sleeping around a little bit more if it's consensual. I'm like, listen, it's not my take. I don't think it's a wise decision.
You don't co-sign that, though.
I don't necessarily co-sign it, but I also am not going to be like, I condemn you for it either. Like, okay, I get it.
Would you say, sis, I love you, that's unhelpful and unhealthy to you?
If I had a friend in my life, right, who I was good friends with, who I had permission to speak into their life, and they're like, hey man, I think that I've just met a girl, we've been hanging out for a few days, I want to have sex. I'd be like, hey man, like, all right, like do your thing. Like it is what it is.
Oh wow.
If someone's like, hey man, I want to go out and get shit-faced every night and find someone to hook up with, that, and we get drunk together, I'd be like, well, let's talk about that. Like, do you think ultimately is that a wise decision? Like, what does that help you or that person?
Yeah.
So I think again, it's a little more great.
You don't think the dude meeting a girl and having a one night stand or a second night is unhelpful?
I didn't say that in my first example.
Sorry. So you said you met somebody.
We hung out a few times. I kind of like her.
I think you said. I thought I heard you say 2 times. We hung out 2 times. I want to.
We're gonna have sex.
Like,
okay.
You don't think that's counterintuitive to human flourishing?
I wouldn't stop him.
But do you think it's counterintuitive to human flourishing?
No, it's just sex.
What does that mean? You don't think there's something unique and spiritual about sex?
I go back and forth on this. My wife and I talk about this a lot too, where we're kind of just like, if we didn't wait, would our sex be like any different now? And it's like, listen, technically, I'm a technical virgin. Okay, like I have hooked up with my ex-girlfriend at some point, you know, and I think that I was taught like you have like these like spiritual soul ties to people. I have never thought about my ex-girlfriend ever once. Being with my wife, like ever.
Yeah.
So I just don't know, like I'm all about like the gray and saying I want to make wise decisions, but also I don't know if it was as like, oh my God, it's the biggest decision of your life.
Well,
like after my wife and I had sex for the first time, we were like, oh, that was cool. We weren't like, wow, like we're so
were you
different.
guys both each other's first?
As far as like full intercourse, yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
We were not crying. We weren't like, oh my God, like
Well,
that was
yeah.
supposed to be.
I mean,
it was like, okay,
It
that
takes
was
a while to get good at it, Tim.
I know, and I won't say that. No, but what I'm saying is, it was in my tradition. It was like over spiritualized.
It was over spiritualized. There's some purity culture influence in there,
Dude,
for sure,
totally.
For sure. So what I'm saying is, if your buddy met a girl and on a second night they're smashing, and then he continues down that trajectory, and in 6 months from then he has another girl that he meets, and second night they're smashing, and then 6 months from now he has another girl he meets.
Yeah.
That's not good.
I think I would just start asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the type of sexual morality you should flee from.
I'm someone who approaches a lot with curiosity.
Yeah.
So I'd just be like, well, like, walk me through this. Like, you know, is it what you think? Like, are you enjoying it? Like, is this what you want to do long term? Like, I would ask questions.
Like, keep your penis in your pants. There's nothing to walk me through. You're horny and you want to smash girls because girls are hot. Like, it's not super deep.
Exactly. Not super deep.
Yeah, it's that, but it is in terms of the ramifications of it.
What's the ramification?
Like I'm sorry, the reason isn't super deep, right? Like the reason is like you're a horny dude, and you want to smash. But the ramifications of what do you mean the ramifications? The ramifications that if you have over 10 partners, it's harder to pair bond in a marriage. The ramifications of the more partners you have, the more likely you are to get divorced. The ramifications of more likely to catch STIs. Like there's all kinds of like tangible ramifications.
I'm not talking about like, dude. We so far example we have someone who had sex with 2 different women in like the span of 2 months. It's not 10 people.
Okay,
so I'm just trying to understand. Like
I'm saying the logical trajectory of smashing on a second night spread out over the course of a couple years. You're now in the dozens and dozens, potentially hundreds of partners.
I think this is where we have very different worlds that we intersect in.
Yeah.
Because the people that I know who maybe aren't even Christian anymore, that's not like their thing.
Okay.
So like I don't have like
I know some dudes
a compass for that.
I know specifically one person I'm close with that's like notch count way up there.
Oh yeah, not really my thing.
You know what I mean? And like
I think
that is, and he cannot maintain a relationship.
Yeah.
He is struggling, dude. He's struggling. And this is what I'll say. Me and Zach were talking about this.
Yeah.
His current paradigm doesn't even serve him well.
Yeah, totally.
His own worldview is harming him.
So let me come a little bit your way. You've done a lot of like trying to see my side on things.
Okay.
I appreciate that. You know, I will say for me personally, when it comes to like hookup culture, I think ultimately it's dehumanizing. You know, I think what it does is it treats people as like objects, no matter who they are.
Sure.
I think when alcohol is involved, it gets really murky really quick with would you do that if you weren't intoxicated?
Sure.
I do think that there are men out there who just want to get their notch count up. But again, I think dehumanizes women. So yeah, I mean, I'm you're never going to hear us talk about, you know, hey, like the more you smash, the better. You know, we're all about, and this is where I get more back to my Bible. Like I think that there's a biblical narrative, and this is Tim Mackey, Bible Project, about like wisdom. How do we partner with the wisdom of God to make wise decisions? Right. And so to me, wisdom is not a binary. It is situational, and I do think that it's maybe a little more flexible with some of the stuff that maybe you and I would agree with. At the same time, there comes a point where it's like, well, is this wise anymore? Like, what is the benefit for you and that person? And like, I don't know, man. Like, if we're talking about dozens of people, like, what's going on there, right? So, from the Christian perspective, I would have wisdom is really important for me.
Yeah, man. And I would just say,
does that make sense?
It does. And I would just say I think the wisdom is there to point us to restraint, and restraint is ultimately great. It's a great muscle to develop. And like, I was just on the Whatever podcast, and I was with 2 girls who were both self-professed Christians, one of which is an OnlyFans model and a MAGA Trump conservative. Craziest thing. I'll send you the video.
You end up in weird places, man.
And check this out. The other one has been going to church fairly regularly, and they do this weird thing on the Whatever podcast where they go around and make everybody tell their notch count. And both of these girls is like 30, 40, 50 partners. Okay? Dude, someone could end up there like that. And that has consequences. There's actual depletion of the ability to pair bond in a long-term relationship when you get into those numbers.
I think
you see what I'm saying? And so I think there's a lot more Christians that are there, cultural Christians that go to church, cultural Christians that I'm a MAGA conservative, America, and it's like, sweetheart, you're an OnlyFans model. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think where it gets a little tricky for me is like, I don't think it's the job of, and I think we would disagree a little bit on this one, but like, I tend to be very careful with how I critique that stuff online because I don't want to come across as someone who's like, hey, you person I don't even know, you have to do this way. I think that could be a problem for me. My hope is that those people have communities that love and support them and are like, hey, can we just kind of be friends with you and like help you navigate some of this stuff? So again, I personally, man, like I am just someone who's like,
but why
some of
not?
this stuff is just not my responsibility.
No, that's fair, but I'm saying I think I understand your position, and I think I get how you came to that conclusion, but I'm also like, man, I feel compelled to tell people the truth. Like, and the truth is, if you wait until marriage, if you get a full-time job, if you avoid having kids out of wedlock.
Yes, the Ben Shapiro argument.
I know those are like cliche conservative talking points.
Yeah.
But the data is the data, man.
Yeah.
That if you actually do things God's way, you are less likely to end up in poverty. You're less likely to end up with a mental breakdown. You're less likely to end up suicidal or depressed. You're less likely to go through a lot of our societal ills. You're less likely to end up with an unwanted pregnancy, right? So like when you talk about the wisdom of God, like, yes, sometimes it's situational. Should I go into business with this person? Should I not go into business? Should we start this? Should we not? I get it. There's other stuff, man, that I think is pretty cut and dry.
All right. I hear you, but I would, You
would disagree. Okay.
Well, to a degree, yeah.
To a degree.
I don't want to open a new can of worms,
No, that's fair. Okay. I want to show you something. I want to see what you think about this.
Oh, boy.
This
surprises.
This is America becoming more conservative from 2022 to 2023. I want to know what you think about this because we're becoming more bigoted and homophobic. It's up there. So here's where America is. This is Gallup, by the way, so this isn't like something Fringe or Fox News. Regardless of whether you think the issue should be legal for each one, please tell me whether you personally believe it is morally acceptable or morally wrong. Okay?
Got it.
Figures of the percentage saying they are morally acceptable. So in 2002, 92% of the population...
2022.
So, excuse me, thank you. 2022, 92% of the population thought birth control was morally acceptable. Now it's 88%.
Yep.
Okay, divorce, 81%. Now it's 78%. Okay, so that means that it went down. Less people think divorce is morally acceptable. Sex between unmarried man and woman, 4%. That went down. So less people think fornication is okay. Having a baby outside of marriage, 70%. That stayed steady. Gambling went down. Interesting. Here's a crazy one. Gay or lesbian relationships, 7 points down. 64%. Think it's morally acceptable in 2002. So excuse me, 2022, 71% did. Okay, the death penalty has went up.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all by this.
That's crazy. Medically testing on animals, sex between teenagers went down. I think that's a W. Pornography, 39% think it's appropriate. In 2022, only 41% thought that went down. And so. Married men and women having an affair. I don't know if this is like the Andrew Tate syndrome.
That's a weird one. Went up?
That went up, bro. Crazy.
That one's
right?
surprising to me.
That is surprising. Suicide went down.
Yeah.
Less people think suicide's appropriate. So, okay, this is polygamy. When a person has more than one spouse at the same time, that stayed the same, right? So it seems like there's the country seems to be shifting more conservative in terms of morality, right? And I'm curious to think, like, what is your thoughts on it? I know you think, like, the right has gone further right.
This is the symptom of the right-wing media complex.
You think it's the right? This is media.
Dude, when you have... Yeah, I mean, think about Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk. These people... I just did the math on this for some research. You know, the Daily Wire, Turning Point, The Blaze, and PragerU do... $315 million a year in funding between them. Okay, their accounts alone, not even their personality accounts, 23 million followers.
Say that the first number again.
$315 million in annual funding between them.
Oh, okay. It's actually less than I thought it was.
315, a third of $1 billion between 4 organizations.
I honestly thought it was bigger.
Daily Wire is 150 million.
I thought it was bigger.
Turning Point 55 million, and they jumped up big time. PragerU 65.
Turning Point is Charlie Kirk.
Yep, Turning Point USA 55 million.
So I thought he made less than that. That's crazy.
He jumped from 2016 to 2 million 5 million up to 55 million by 2022 because there's big funding behind these people. And
Who's funding it? Is this private donations?
So it's a combination. It depends on
Super
the
PACs or
depends on the organization. Turning Point, for example, definitely has grassroots. They're a nonprofit, but there are some billionaires that back these people. There's a whole article that we've done on this before.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so this to me actually just is actually the result of, I think, very effective right-wing media talking points. 100%.
Okay. So let's be fair. So I think that the reason why Andrew Tate is pervasive, is because of half-truths being said with very wrong prescriptions.
Okay.
So Andrew Tate is pervasive, meaning he's spreading, because it's not that there are aspects that some men exhibit that are wrong and should be corrected in sinful behaviors. It's that manhood as a whole is toxic. Toxic masculinity as a whole is generalized. And so someone like Andrew Tate comes in and he goes, no, being competent, strong, capable, being an earner and a provider, those are good attributes. The world's lying to you. They think that they want to keep you weak and docile. It's pervasive because there's a half-truth baked into it.
Okay.
So do you think that the reason why the Daily Wires and the Turning Points, I'm not super familiar with all of Turning Points content, but I consume some Daily Wire stuff. Like if you had the Steel Man, like why do you think it's so pervasive? Like I can Steel Man Andrew Tate, though I completely disagree with his conclusions and presuppositions and his prescriptions of the world. I think he's wrong on a lot of stuff, right?
Okay.
But I also understand why he's pervasive. I think it's a yo-yo from the opposite extreme. It's a yo-yo from men oftentimes getting blamed for almost everything in society, right? And he steps in.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of stuff goes back to the patriarchy, right? Like whenever we're talking about, it's like patriarchy.
Yeah, because they're not getting blamed. Women are the ones getting blamed for all this stuff.
So we would disagree on who is and isn't getting blamed. But,
Totally.
But there is a demographic that he's resonating with that I think.
Yeah, incels.
It's not just incels.
Dude, the guy
I promise you it's not just incels. If there was just incels, there wouldn't be women talking about their husbands and their boyfriends.
Yeah, the trad movement, is that what we're going to get into?
No, not the trad movement.
I'm
talking about women saying their boyfriends and husbands have been contaminated by Andrew Tate, and all of a sudden they're getting weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like if you had the Steel Man, like why do you think America is becoming seemingly more conservative, or why is Daily Wire pervasive? Why are these organizations pervasive?
I think that the reason why Daily Wire is pervasive is they play on a pretty classical American ideal of hey, this country was once great. We have to get back to being great. And this other group is the one who's responsible for all of your problems.
What other group?
It depends. It could be the liberals. It could be the gays. It could be CRT. It could be Black Lives Matter. It could be wokeness. And you just insert whatever that culture war talking point is in that moment. And they're also very effective, and they're also good at pulling up anecdotal evidence to kind of draw a bigger conclusion, right? So if you pull something of like, oh, this school district did this thing, suddenly people go, oh my God, there is this pervasive thing happening among the entire national school system of like this thing happening, right? So I think that's part of why they're really effective at that. Plus they have a huge ally in evangelical spaces. Like evangelical pastors love their stuff. They tend to align more politically thanks to what, the moral majority has built on over time, with the politics and theology kind of becoming more and more enmeshed, which we can track through the evangelical movement and how that has shifted to over time. Yeah. So I think that those people play on that. They also play off the idea that we were a Christian nation and that this enemy named secularism wants to take away all of your rights. So I think that they're just really good at pulling pretty classic like fear-mongering tactics that have worked effectively to convince people that, hey, at any day now, you could be thrown in prison for your faith. And that's not an exaggeration, because when I was at the Charlie Kirk's Turning Point Pastor Summit, I watched a lead pastor say that
That's crazy.
several times.
That's amazing.
Like, hey guys, anytime now, Joe Biden's America, you could be thrown in prison. To amens.
Oh my gosh.
So I do think absolutely
that wasn't a real Steel Man, but I think that does this a fair.
That's what they do. That's what they say.
No, but a Steel Man is you're going to give them a good faith argument for why they're
my
pervasive.
apologies. You're right. Okay. You're right. I went to negative. I think the good faith argument would be, hey guys, America is the best nation on earth. We've been blessed, and we need to protect our rich heritage. And there are people and forces in the world who want to destroy everything that makes America and Western civilization great. And these are the threats, and here's why. They want to attack the family unit. They want to redefine gender roles. They want to make us a less Christianized country, and our morals come from a Judeo-Christian worldview. So it's really important that we preserve that so we can preserve the nation for our kids and are preserving human flourishing. How's that?
That was a great steal, man.
There
One
you
time
go.
I'm gonna give you the that was good. So it's becoming. So there's two sides, right? Because this is what I don't do. I don't do the appeal to motive fallacy. So I don't think that Ben Shapiro is intentionally fear-mongering. I think he's doing what you described. And then I think a proxy of that is dunk on the libs. Let's just dunk on everybody and make them seem stupid, right? I think the flip side to that is I think it would be disingenuous to not acknowledge that whether it's postmodernity, secularism, whatever you want to call it, that there is not remnants of a paradigm and a worldview that's in complete contrast with the areas of and ideals that we've fallen short in. America has things we've fallen short in. If we didn't, there wouldn't even be the idea of pointing people back to that. But there definitely seems to be a paradigm, and I'm not talking no conspiracy theory, Frankfurt School of University stuff, right?
Yeah, Frankfurt School.
Yeah, but I'm genuinely like, do you see some of that? Like, do you see like the desire to wipe away any objective morality, the way to even the phrase "your truth" and "my truth," right? You don't see any of that as like taking culture by storm and like searing people's conscience.
I mean, I've interviewed a few philosophers about postmodernism and just like what it actually is versus how it's portrayed. I'm not going to claim to be an expert to repeat that. I mean, I think that the idea of your truth, my truth is saying that we can live lives differently and be okay. It's fighting against this idea, I think, of this religious perspective of, hey, either you do it quote unquote God's way or you're just going to fail at everything. So I think that's kind of more what it's getting at. I think that morality is really complicated, as we talked about. I mean, I use this example actually often, and you use it already, where it's like, is lying wrong? Yes. Okay. You know, how about if you're going to protect Jews?
Sure.
Right. Well, it's different. And so, like, I think it's just acknowledging that. Listen, modernity did a lot of good for us, clearly, but it made promises that I think it couldn't keep. Like we can absolutely unpack the foundational objective morality of things. Yeah. And life is way more complicated than blank and white binaries.
I think it also made some promises about equality, about everyone having a shot at life, liberty, right? Or those things. Like there were some actual promises made that I think the founding fathers, at least in document, did that they fell short on, right? The
society no doubt. I mean, this is like Frederick Douglass,
absolutely, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think
James Baldwin, etc.
You bring up Frederick Douglass, James Baldwin. I would say Martin Luther King Jr.
Totally
pointing back to the actual ideals that we had and saying, America, we fell short in these areas.
Yeah,
we could do better.
Totally.
Versus saying, let's burn the whole thing down.
Yeah, I'm not okay. I'll put it this way. I'm sure that you know people, I'm sure we can find people who would say, let's burn the whole thing down. I'm not aware of people with serious power who are like, let's burn the whole thing down. I think a lot of the things I hear from people who are trying to change things is kind of harkening back to that. Like, hey, we have ideals that we're not living up to. It's kind of, for me, the way I see it, like how I critique the church, where I'm like, guys, I critique you because I know the church can do better than what it's doing now, right? And I do think, by the way, that some of the stuff inside the church culture has to go. I think that we do have to gut out some of the systemic issues that we see. And so I can totally see how someone's like, yeah, we have to get rid of like the fact that like we're still dealing with systemic racism in this country in a lot of ways, right? So like I understand that, but I'm not aware of people that I work with anyway who are like, oh, we need to like burn the whole thing down.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say burn. Well, I mean, dude, a lot of the founders of Black Lives Matter, the organization, not the movement, we're definitely on some like the system needs to completely burn.
I mean,
we need to disrupt the nuclear family, right? So, like there was things that they took off their website after they got called on it. Yeah. That and this are massively pervasive, right? If you're talking about Kimdi, the only way to combat past discrimination was a future discrimination.
Yes, which he's unpacking. Have you read the book?
I don't need to read the book.
But you'll pull the quote out. Come on. Read the whole If you read that chapter, what he's talking about.
What is he talking about?
He uses another example. He uses actually COVID.
Okay.
He goes, hey, when COVID happened, we had to prioritize elderly people to make sure that they were okay first, and then get vaccines out to everyone else. He goes, that's a form of discrimination. We discriminated to make sure that they were okay.
That's a bad
and his
parallel.
point, hey, you can call whatever you want, but I don't want people to think is that like he's arguing for how it's been twisted. The idea is that if a runner is on a track with other runners and someone breaks that person's leg and then they all go running, it's still not a fair race because their leg was broken. That's the idea, is like the black community in particular has been set so far behind the 8 ball thanks to things like the Tulsa Race Massacre, thanks to things like that we saw during civil rights, redlining. We can go down the list. We would agree here, I think, on a lot of this stuff, right? So giving those groups or making room or giving them a boost up to get them up to speed so they have access to equal opportunity is a good thing.
I think access to equal opportunity is different than access to equal outcomes for
but
groups.
that's not the same thing.
But it is different.
I agree.
Okay.
And we're talking about equal opportunity.
I think every American. I think every American would say, "I want people to have a shot."
Right, but they don't know what that means. Because how do you fix that? How do you fix the war on drugs from Nixon, where they admitted that it was really about incarcerating black men? Right. So this whole talk about the
you overturned the 100-to-1 coke and crack disparity, which was
right, but the effects of those people still in prison is still a thing.
Well, if someone's in prison for the 100-to-1 coke to crack disparity, which I don't know, folks from the 80s and 90s are still in prison.
But what I'm saying is that gutted black communities.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, if that law was overturned. Right, if we overturn that law, if was Alabama the last state to overturn interracial marriage, right, in the year 2000, if these laws have changed, right, and then what are we talking about? Then we're talking about policies like affirmative action that is attempting to give black people a boost, but it's really white women benefiting from it, and it's hurting Asian students. Like, that's how that policy pragmatically played out. You see what I'm saying? So, like, I think a lot of these laws to create new discrimination are good in intent, but I think they hurt people. Like, I think they hurt other people.
It's the civil rights movement, man. It's forced integration, right? The government eventually said, you're not doing this, so we're going to force you to integrate. Right.
I think that's different than saying.
Well, it's different because we're not in that moment in history. Well, if we were, we'd be having the same conversation.
But I would say, like, it's different if there's an Asian student that is a 99% percentile, and then you bring in someone that's an 87% percentile and give that person the shot. Like, that's hurting a different minority now, and that's how a lot of affirmative action played out.
Yeah, I don't know much about how it played out. I gotta be honest with you on that. I read what I could when the whole thing kind of came out.
You do know that white women benefited the most from affirmative action.
I know very little about the implication. Frankly, I just don't know.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think a lot of policies are intended to help and they hurt. I think that's what ends up happening.
Well, then what's the other solution then? You just keep things as the status quo. We go back to color blindness.
In terms of I said nothing about color blindness.
Well, what I'm trying to say is, like, if we're not trying to make policies to fix the problems that we've caused other people groups, like we as a country.
Sure.
What is the other answer then?
Other
more free markets?
Are you familiar with Homeboy Industries?
I know that name. Is he the Catholic priest dude? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you familiar with his work?
Not much of it.
Homeboy Industries is a nonprofit in downtown LA. It's almost became like a truce area, a neutral area for gang members. They can come in, they can get skilled, they can get certified, they can develop trades, craftsmen, and then they're working towards getting people jobs, getting people opportunities. I think the solutions is in equipping people for financial literacy, dealing with their mental health, and allowing them to move up and create better economic opportunities for themselves. I think that's how you combat it. I think Homeboy Industries is a beacon of light. I got another buddy of mine who runs a nonprofit down the street, and it's a shelter.
What I hear you saying is that one of the solutions then is, if you're born, I live in New Jersey. One of the cities is Camden, very poor area. You know,
I'm familiar with that.
Right, yeah. So the solution is, hey, if you're born in Camden, just gotta work extra hard, man.
No, that's not what I just said.
Yeah,
I said
financially literate.
No. I said what I painted you was what Matthew 25 describes. Matthew 25 describes the parable of the talents, right? You're familiar with the parable of talents.
I'm not that far gone.
Okay, well, you said you don't pray anymore, so I'm like, I don't know where this man is at. Matthew 25 goes from the parable of the talents. And then the interesting thing, which is, by the way, very capitalistic and like work hard, right?
Oh, okay.
But let me get there.
I'm getting there.
And then from Matthew 25, the parable ends. That parable ends, and then he goes right into caring for the least of these. And people compartmentalize those two passages. Parable of the talents, yay, entrepreneurship, rich, all that stuff. Get it, right? But it goes right into caring for the least of these. It goes right into, when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was homeless, you took me in. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me, right? So I think the solution is those folks who are capable and have the resources, build something for your life, and then go and help other people, right? Go and help other people. I think when we're looking at there's in 1 Timothy, he talks about the widows in the church, right? And he says, hey, there's widows in the church. Some of them are young. Listen, if they're gonna be busybodies, they should just get remarried. There's other widows in the church that have families. Hey, you should take care of the widows that are a part of your family. Any man that doesn't provide for the needs of his family, specifically his immediate family, he's worse than a non-believer, is denied the faith, right? And then there's the widows who who don't have anyone. Those are the widows that the church should take care of, right? And so there's this system of hey, we as the hands and feet of Jesus, those of us that are capable, go and create opportunities for other people.
Right. So I'm trying to.
So I would point it back to personal charity.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Which is not working.
Based on what?
Based on all the stats. Are you kidding me?
Based on what stats?
Okay, the average BIPOC worker makes $15 an hour or less.
What's it? Well, BIPOC worker? What are you talking about?
Black, Indigenous people of color. BIPOC.
Okay.
They make $15 an hour or less.
Okay.
The average single parent who works full time, $15 or less. The wealth gap in this country is bigger than ever. Okay, poverty has not even come close to being even limited, let alone like helped. And also, how about passages like James 5? Are those for you as
Yeah, absolutely.
So the warning about like, woe to you rich oppressors who do not pay your employees fairly.
Yeah.
So like, what do you see?
You could ask my employees.
No, not you. I'm saying, I'm asking like,
They,
does that,
they
does
get
that have-
compensated. They
does
get a
that-
percentage too every month.
How much you guys get paid? Yeah, you guys get 401k. But like, does that have any implication for like how we critique systems and how we critique business, how we critique corporate capitalism?
I think there's a difference between systems and individuals. Systems are always going to be jacked
You're
up.
individualizing the Bible as
Well, no, because there was no systems back then.
Yes, there were.
There was the Roman Empire. That
The
was
system of the
extremely-
empire.
Yes, that was extremely oppressive to Christians.
Which was nothing like our capitalist society today, right?
It was
They're
worse.
night and day.
It was 100 times worse.
Oh, depending on who you were.
It was 100 times worse for the people that were reading those scriptures at the time.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Okay.
because they were Jewish people under the empire.
Yes,
of course.
it was worse for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're living in a time where even poor people have a better experience than rich people from 150 years ago.
No, this is a bad argument because what is the standard of living that they need? If you can't get affordable health care, if you're eating shitty food all the time, if you're worried to death that you can't pay rent, though, even though we have more technology, people still
air
have the same.
conditioning, shelter, cars.
Some of them do. We have over 500,000 people who are currently unhoused, and we have more houses available that are vacant for those people.
Well, that's that. Okay, so there we're talking about that's a system issue. If we have empty retail spaces that are sitting vacant, and we can't rezone those areas
And
to
houses.
make them
We have
make
vacant
them
houses too,
and we can't rezone those areas, and we can't figure out a way to do that. I think the homelessness issue goes back to when we opened up the mental institutions. I think that's really the root of it. If you look at the number of beds people had per the number of beds people had way back in the 50s, and then now there's way less beds per 100,000 people than there were in the 50s and 60s. And we shut down so many mental institutions because this is the give and take. Do you institutionalize people without their bodily consent if they're not a threat to themselves and somebody else, or do you institutionalize them against their will? And we said that's wrong. So a lot of these institutions shut down. There's less beds for mental illness stuff today than there was 50 years ago, which is crazy per capita. And what happened? Homelessness went up, mental illness went up, mass shootings went up. All these things went up on the byproduct of that. So I think the homelessness issue, I think, is way less capitalism's bad, and I think it's way more mental illness and a lack of resources for people.
That is also okay. And listen, I'm going to be clear. I'm not necessarily like, oh, capitalism has to be destroyed. I get we live in a capitalist society, but we have to understand the problem. That is a problem with capitalism.
How is that a problem with capitalism?
Because we don't have affordable healthcare in this country. It's all based on a capitalist society. So if you can't afford healthcare, if you can't afford your premium,
What state are you in?
can't get New Jersey.
You guys don't have affordable health care?
It depends how much money you make, right? So
we have covered California.
No, we don't have that.
Okay, so affordable health care passed with Obama. California got covered California. The reason I was able to quit my job in 2015 is because I got covered California. My health insurance went, I would have paid $1,500 for my family on the free market.
Sounds about right.
Right?
Yeah.
I was able to quit my job when we were paying $300 a month on through Covered California. And I think we all have covered California.
Yeah. So we have New Jersey Family Care, which if you make essentially a poverty wage, you can get coverage. But once you jump $1 over that, you're no longer able to get coverage, right? So this is a huge dilemma.
So we've been able to maintain coverage, and we don't make a poverty.
So then what happens is New Jersey has another option, which essentially they subsidize, depending on how much money you make, up to a certain amount, what you might be paying for a healthcare cost, right? But that's only if you're in a state that has those programs. Many do not. And this is kind of my point is like, I think what I'm trying to say ultimately is we live in the world's richest country. Like literally, financially, we have the most wealth like per capita anywhere, right?
Sure.
We have no excuse not to be able to provide things to people that they need to survive in a society, whether it's housing or affordable health care. And if we can fuel our military industrial complex by almost $1 trillion a year, you're telling me we can't figure out like some of these other issues that other countries with less wealth than us do pretty darn well. Not perfect. No system is perfect. I don't think it's perfect, but there are systems and people who live in the world who are like, you guys worry about your health care. You worry about if you leave your job, losing your health care. So like, I use that point a lot because it's like, that's a great example of we could fix this stuff.
Yeah.
But we don't.
I think it's not, we could fix it. Sure enough. Fair enough. I think we could fix it. I think the government's too inflated and inefficient to fix it. I think it's too inflated and inefficient to fix it. I mean,
that's a good take.
For covered California and for Obamacare when it passed, there was a lot of other issues around it, infrastructure-wise. Other people whose rates did go way up.
Totally.
Right? So it was
a horrible compromise.
Yeah, it was a tough compromise.
And I was alive during that time. I know what the talking point was from every single Republican ever. It's socialism, it's Marxism. They fought that bill tooth and nail to make it help make it what it was.
Right.
I'm not saying Democrats are innocent or that they don't do bad things. I'm just saying that, listen, in my tradition, dude, here's what I'll tell you. In my faith tradition, okay, the political perspective you had as a, quote, Jesus follower was welfare is Marxism and socialist. People need to work harder to get jobs. Poor people are just lazy. People who don't have health care probably don't work hard enough. We can't give affordable health care because that's socialism, and that's the Christian way. Can we also minimize the amount of regulations for access to guns? You're a good Christian.
I think when you are describing policy things and you're connecting them to faith, I understand how that can be murky. Okay, I think here is one of the areas I say we have to compartmentalize a little bit. And we have to say these are different policies that impact people differently. So do I think right now in 2023, with all the access to technology and all the access to trade schools and all the access to learn and all the access to do all the stuff somebody can learn, whether they're in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia or they're in Florida, like people have more access to education, people have more access to learning skills than ever before. And I think, and it's not as shallow as pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's not what I'm saying.
Not to put you, first off, I'm reading this person's comment. It's hilarious. Honestly, it was easier to listen to the chick on the whatever podcast than listen to Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, he's
trying
to roast you. He's trying to roast
I've been
you.
roasted.
Yeah.
Make sure you give me a follow though. But really quick, I mean, do you have like my understanding in particular of the Appalachian folks, like they have access to almost nothing. Like they are the epitome of poor whites in America. Do they have access to trade schools? Like how would they even get there?
I don't know about trade schools, but I'm saying they have access to pulling up YouTube and developing and learning a skill. You can learn almost any new skill within 24 hours.
I mean, I don't mean to downplay, but that sounds to me like, hey, listen, you can be your own boss, babe. Just join my MLM. Like you can get the Ferrari too if you just work hard enough. It's like, no, it's not that simple. The system is stacked against the person in the MLM to get that thing.
Okay.
Right? So like you can say, hey, go on YouTube, it's all there. But there's other things in place that factor into that person not succeeding that are outside of their control.
If someone right now has a computer or a phone, they can learn how to edit video right now. I'm using the most tangible, practical example right now. They can reach out to a plethora of creators and get paid to make short form content right now.
No, they cannot.
I'm telling you, I know people that I've personally hired.
Yeah, right.
Tim, that I've personally hired that had no video experience.
Right.
That I said, hey, take this conversation with me and Tim, chop it up, make it into a short. We'll pay you X amount.
Right.
Right. And I've had people reach out and build agencies for themselves,
right.
Tim.
But
let me finish my thought. And they make a couple grand for me every month, and then they ask me if I can connect them with someone else. Then they hire another client, then they hire another client, and before you know it, they're making 10 grand a month. And they're doing it on an iPad and on a phone. Like that's happening right now.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is you're telling
there's no system suppressing them, bro. There's no one keeping them from doing that.
No, dude, you are telling the story of what multi-level marketing people tell their followers. Hey, here's our success. For every one of those, there are 1,000 that aren't there, dude, because of other reasons. How
Like
do you
what?
buy a computer? How do you buy a computer?
You go to the library and use a computer.
Oh, okay. So you're telling me that what they have to do is they have to somehow get your content on a library computer,
how can they buy
load
a
up
computer?
Final Cut, edit it, and learn it themselves, and then grow a
What do you-
business.
How much do you think a computer is they need?
For editing?
Yeah.
Software?
Yeah. Ballpark. Just give me a ballpark.
I mean, well, plus the software too, probably, right?
Okay.
$1,000.
Okay, $1,000. You don't think someone can scrape up $1,000 to get an M1
In the
MacBook
Appalachian
Air?
Mountains?
I don't
Probably
know.
not.
I don't know about the Appalachian Mountains.
That's my point, dude.
I'm talking about. Let's just remove the Appalachian. Let's just say the Appalachian
But
Mountains
they exist.
are North Korea.
Systemic
they're just
problems
isolated.
deserve systemic solutions.
They're isolated from all the civilization. No one's helping them. They can't go and make any money because let's just say that. Let's say I can see the point. Okay, let's say I can see the point. You think the average American right now can't scrape together $1,000 right now to go buy a laptop right now and figure out a skill or a trade to start earning more money for themselves?
You should look up how much the average American has in their savings account right now.
Oh, it's awful.
Thank you.
It's
There's my
awful.
point.
Yeah,
the average American
60
can't take $1,000 hit to anything.
60% of them, well, it's more than that. 70%
It's high.
living
It's high.
paycheck to paycheck. Most people can't afford
It's like
$1,000
$500
emergency.
in like their savings.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Okay, so there's your $1,000 that they can't
It's
scrape
brutal.
up.
It's
There
brutal.
you go. That's my answer.
75% of Americans are also overweight, right? Like, yeah, that's a real statistic.
Okay.
I'm just saying. You
Right, because look at our food supply. Have you watched Food Inc.?
Yes.
All right, so
Yes.
you know that
So-
the food that we're getting
so-
fed is garbage because the corporations want to count. They would rather make the profit than actually feed people healthy, nutritious food. It is cheaper for McDonald's to make a cheap burger full of garbage and sell it for $2.99 than it is for them to actually sell people healthy meat.
Okay.
So like, I'm just trying to make the point that again, I'm not trying to sound super extreme. I get that there is, of course, a level of personal responsibility.
Yes.
But if we don't acknowledge that there are systems that are benefiting at the expense of other people,
Yes.
right, and that have been put in place before that we still have ripple effects of, systemic
I'm not
issues need
denying-
systemic solutions, dude.
Tim, I'm not denying that there's not crazy subsidies between the government and the sugar companies and the corn companies. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's systems and obviously there's issues in place.
Great.
I'm saying I don't bank on you and me, or if we were to combine all of our audiences, that we're going to overturn the fact that sugar is pumped into all of our food. I'm not banking on that, bro. I'm not banking on we're going to overturn high fructose corn syrup so that that's not the food easily available. I'm saying the human spirit has the capacity to do way more when it's packaged with right information and when it's given a demonstration of said right information. I'm saying that I made a video 3 years ago when I was broke about everything I spend at Aldi's to hit my macronutrient goal and be able to consume 180 grams of protein every day and get shredded. In 2019, when I was broke, when I was just a full-time Christian rapper, and I put that video on YouTube, and it cost me $32 a week shopping at Aldi's. Let's adjust for inflation. Let's say it's $40 a week shopping at Aldi's. People can do it, man. Like, people can do it. And I'm just saying, I'm not banking on the government to change.
Okay.
I'm not banking on the system to get overturned anytime soon. I don't think that's plausible. I'm banking on the human spirit and saying, this is what we got. It's the best time to be alive. It's the worst time to be alive. It's an amazing time to go and build a business. It's also very hard. It's also very competitive. That's where we're at right now, dude. Okay. And so I think it's like, if we're going to point to all these systemic issues, I think there's a much stronger argument to make for food. Like, I think food is a real one that I would get with you with. Food deserts, all that kind of stuff. I think some of the other stuff of, like, you know, all of a sudden people are incapable of learning how to learn. I think that some of that goes back to environment, but I think some of that just goes back to information. And I think now we have more information than ever, man.
Yeah, well, I do think ultimately the livable wage issue is probably the biggest issue for me. Like, people who deserve, I mean, the agreement was, right, if you work hard, you can make it. People do work. I mean, people work 2-3 jobs sometimes, and they make like poverty wages. You know, I think that
Yes.
a livable wage is very important.
And I would say a livable wage is something that is not a minimum wage. I don't think the minimum wage was ever intended to be a livable
Oh, it
wage.
was. It was.
It was?
Yes, look up the work of Robert Reich, I think his name is.
Because everything I've looked into, the minimum wage, or even how the minimum wage has hurt entry level pay, I've never seen anybody say that was intended. Meaning that the person, when I was at Pizza Hut, working for a minimum wage. Never in 1,000 years that I expect that.
No, right. But in the
to be-
70s, and when it was first formed, it was designed to give people a rock bottom. You have to earn at least this much so you can survive in the country.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that thing has not changed with adjusted for
Well,
inflation.
to your point, a lot of things change. Morality changes.
True.
Right? And so it's like, that's not the reality anymore. So
Right,
then,
but it should be. It's hurting people.
okay. So, or
Or what?
we go, hey, you're 17, 18, 19 years old, 16 to whatever. You're just entering the labor force. Go work at McDonald's.
That's a bad stat. Almost half those people are above 25 or older.
Let me finish my thought.
Okay, sorry.
Go work at
I'm angsty.
McDonald's. Go work at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Go work whatever. Which, by the way, I think Chick-fil-A, you probably hate Chick-fil-A, but I think they do a great job of equipping leaders and training people and developing those virtues for them to go and do other things and crush. Go do that for a couple of years. Learn to show up on time. Learn to do the remedial task, right? This is not intended to be your permanent solution. And if you can avoid having kids outside of wedlock, if you can avoid making a mess of your finances and majoring in something stupid and going into a gang of debt, you can move your way up and you can build relationships and you can progress up the ladder. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable to tell people.
Well, like I said earlier before I cut you off, I'm sorry for cutting you off. I got a little passionate there.
It's all good.
But the average person making minimum wage is not a teenager.
I understand that.
So, I
But
mean,
how do they end up there, Tim?
How do you think?
I think.
Do you think
from-
people want to stay there?
I think some people don't plan, and when you don't plan, you fail.
Personal responsibility.
I mean, what's the alternative? So, like the man is keeping all of them down.
Well, like I said, dude, I mean, a lot of the people who work minimum wage jobs are working in places like inner cities. They have no access to the kind of resources that folks like you and I, even we have very different backgrounds, but I would say for me, the resources I had access to are very different. And I think that we underestimate that it takes networks of people to get people into places.
How many millionaires do you know, Tim?
Probably a few.
85% of America's millionaires are first generation rich.
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
Tim,
stat.
all the millionaires I know came from poverty like I did.
I know, but my friend, what I'm trying to explain to you is that, okay.
I get, listen.
No, what I'm trying to say is that kind of evidence.
It's anecdotal. I get it.
It's not even that.
It's outliers.
Like it doesn't help the broad swath of people who are currently experiencing the things we just talked about. They don't have money in their bank account. They're trying to survive. The predatory loan industry is crazy. The college loan industry is a huge predatory.
Federally subsidized.
Yeah.
That's the government trying to help.
No, it's the companies getting in bed with the government and running the show. Okay,
But the government tried to help.
And if we had affordable education, it wouldn't be a thing. But
Totally.
I digress.
And that got inflated after the government started subsidizing these loans, which then created a lot of these systems.
Totally, government trying to help because the loan
Let's keep the government out.
No, let's get the predatory loans out, dude. Let's get
the
Fannie
government
Mae out.
Yes, but the government subsidizing it is what led to more predatory stuff.
Right. So the
So
solution,
keep the government out.
No, so keep the financial loan industry out. Make college affordable. There should be no privatized loan incentive to for those kids to take out a loan.
I think
college.
people should figure out a way to pay for their own school. I went to Maricosta. Do you know much of my story? Like, bro, single parent household, dad was gone, like poor, like welfare for the first 5 years we were in America, right? Like I got a 1.1 GPA in the 7th grade. My only saving grace was I had a mother that cared, a single mother that cared, and she worked nights. And I got into a lot of trouble, got arrested at 11. I can give you so many examples of kids like me, kids that were almost aborted, friends of mine that, man, despite all the deck being stacked against them, like we figured it out.
And that's great.
So all I'm saying is, and this is what I'm saying, if we know that, and let's just say selection bias, bro, survivorship bias. Let's just say that, and we're just outliers. We're just outliers. Wouldn't, just logically speaking, wouldn't the approach to be, well, let's pay attention to what the outliers do. Let's pay attention to what 85% of America's millionaires did to become millionaires. Let's pay attention to it. If I know that all the people walking around who are shredded with six packs and they got muscles, they all like chicken and broccoli, and they figured out a way to eat chicken and broccoli. Shouldn't then we consider that maybe it's the chicken and broccoli that helps people get shredded and not all the other things? And yes, there's all kinds of challenges distracting you from eating well. There's all kinds of challenges distracting you from developing skills and figuring it out. Wouldn't we want to study the outliers?
And then apply it to the majority?
Yes. Maybe everyone's not going to become a millionaire. Maybe everyone's not going to have six packs.
Maybe that's not someone's goal.
Sure.
Maybe someone just wants to have a job and get by and be happy.
But no one wants to be fat. No one wants to be unhealthy. No one wants to be broke.
Okay.
Right? So if we're looking at these people do X, Y, and Z behavior and they get this result, and these people do X, Y, and Z and they get this result with their friends, and I want to get that result, wouldn't I just go and reverse engineer what
Yeah, so
what
essentially
they
what
did?
you're saying is like be like the person that maybe you don't want to be like. Like maybe someone doesn't want to be in the gym all day. Do they have a right to have access to affordable food and healthy food?
No, I'm not saying.
I think we're talking past each other. I'm not really following here.
Yeah, maybe you are. I'm not saying. I'm saying if someone lived on less than what they make, saved, developed useful skills, was friendly and likable, extended their network, tried to solve people's problems, and those are the variables that we see of people who end up becoming successful financially. Maybe they don't become millionaires, maybe they don't become millionaires. But those are the attributes, those are the skill sets, those are the characteristics.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we point people to those skill sets? That's what I'm saying.
What I'm trying to say is that many people don't have the option to do what you just described. They can't save the money.
Okay.
They can't find the job that can give them an affordable wage.
Okay.
They can't find the food that is affordable that doesn't also kill them. I'm just saying for a lot of people, those aren't options given. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to say is that ultimately, I think that we as a collective society and as a government have an obligation to do what we can to promote those people's well-being and to give them better access to
Let me ask
resources.
you this. If those many people, which I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like that, fair enough. If those same people also on average consume 30 hours of entertainment a week, right?
Okay.
Where does the personal responsibility come in? Does it ever come in? Like, yes, fair enough. Okay, there's people that they don't have the same access, same opportunity. They don't know how to make opportunity. They don't got the chip on their shoulder to figure it out. They don't got that fire in them. Okay. Yet they all have smartphones. They're all on TikTok. They all spend exorbitant amounts of time watching Netflix and YouTube passively.
Okay.
Do we never pay? Average American watch 30 hours of TV a week. That's a part-time job.
Boy, I mean, it just seems it's very interesting to be like, okay, you watch too much TV, so like this systemic poverty that you're in is your fault. I'm just trying to understand like what the connection is to that.
The
like,
lack of stewardship with your time, talent, and treasure may be what's causing your poverty.
I mean, they're definitely, listen, I'm not trying to draw a blanket like, hey, it's all this or all that. I'm sure there are people who maybe have, okay, I'll give you an example. My dad, I grew up in construction, blue collar, right? We've had a lot of guys that we gave jobs to, right? A lot. Usually white dudes, mid-20s, and like they just weren't good workers. Like they didn't want to show up on time. They didn't want to take advantage of the opportunity given to them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Fair. Like,
Yes.
dude, we're giving you, and it was a good wage. Like, it was a fair wage. It wasn't minimum wage. Like for the time, it was good, And also my dad wanted a good worker. He wasn't a hard boss to work with. And what would they do? Meh, I'm not going to show up today. I totally get that.
What percentage of people do you think are like that?
I have no idea, dude.
Do you think more people are like that, or more people are, I'm going to go above and beyond and crush it as your dad's employee?
Wait, I'm sorry. What are you asking? Say it one more time. It's been a long conversation.
I still had stuff we're going to have to scrap for next time. Do you think,
myself back up.
do you think most people are like the way you described?
In America?
I'm not going to show up on time. I'm not going to perform hard. I have a sense of entitlement, right? And we could say all those things are because of external factors in the system and the man trying to keep them down.
Okay.
Or do you think most people show up with an amazing attitude, ready to learn new skills and go above and beyond?
I think most people are hungry to want to do better. They just don't either have the access to resources to do better or know how to do better.
Okay.
I mean, like, it's funny.
I think it's the latter.
It's
I think
interesting.
know how to do better. I think that's an education problem first.
It's almost like the
And then
money
the-
thing, right? Like I've met people who, again, I grew up in small business. So managing money was like something I was taught very early on. I'll use my partner because she'd be cool with it. When I first met my partner, like I was like, oh, how much money is in your bank account? She's like, oh, I have a lot. $80. I'm like, $80? Like that is nothing, right? And so I was taught a skill on how to manage my money while she was not, right? So could I necessarily fault her for thinking that $80 was a lot of money? No, right? But I was able to give her part of my contribution to our marriage is that I take care of the money for the family, right? But there are a lot of people who have no one like that until they're like even in their maybe either mid 40s or 50s,
Sure.
never taught how predatory some of these loan
yeah.
sharks are, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to make the nuance of like, I don't think it's all like people are just too lazy, but I do think that there definitely are people out there who are given opportunity and they squander it.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So in that, like, I think the solution, this is just me and you're going to hate this.
Okay.
The solution for folks who are coming from that category, if they don't know, is not always, but more closer to an Anthony O'Neill or a Dave Ramsey. Like, I think that's a more tenable solution for them in terms of the information's free. You can listen to the podcast free. This is how me and my wife paid off over $100,000 of debt in 18 months by listening to Dave Ramsey every day. We both come from poverty. We're the first ones in either of our families to get college degrees. And that is why I think that the information, they don't know how, I think is much more reasonable than saying the government needs to do it.
Well, just one point I want to make about that, because I listen to a lot of Dave Ramsey, a lot. I've listened to him for a long time. It was not very often you heard someone saying, yeah, I make $20,000 a year and paid off all my college debt. Usually it was like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor now. I make 6 figures. I make 85, whatever it is. So I'm just saying, like, there's definitely a barrier to entry before like you can even afford to even take a pay cut and live off rice and beans to then afford to pay off your debt for a lot of people. I think that's kind of the problem. And again, I think it's kind of cyclical, but it's like when we have a hard time finding, forget minimum wage, just livable wages that are just normal jobs. I mean, when I was looking for jobs a long time ago, 2 years ago during the pandemic, it was like, must have master's degree. We'll pay you $45,000 a year. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. It's hard.
So what would you say hourly is like a livable job?
I think it has to go by state. You know, like what
in California, what would you say?
I don't know. I know in New Jersey, like I did the math one time. It was like $26 an hour, something like that. You know?
Yeah. I know right now in California, you can go do a weekend certification, or maybe even less than like a day certification. You can become a phlebotomist and make more than that.
Huh. What's a phlebotomist do? What do they do?
They draw blood.
That's pretty cool.
A lot of people don't know this though.
No.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
So this is the gap. Like the gap to me is information. It's not always systems. I don't think it's like the system. I think broken people are going to do what's in their best interest. And I think money, unfortunately, is going to travel up to people that get the money and know how to handle the money by making the product.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a byproduct of humanity. And I don't think it's something that is honestly fixable.
Do you think as Christians we have an obligation to fight for more equitable systems?
I think as Christians, I have an obligation to, if I'm the guy with the 5 talents, to go above and beyond and care for as many people as I can. And then I think create economic opportunities for them so then they can do the same. And then I think like, my dream would be like to build a homeboy industries, like to build something where people can go to get certified to be a barber, to be a plumber. And I don't know about you. I know a lot of barbers and plumbers making over $100,000 a year right now.
Oh yeah. Plumbers are, again, I grew up in the trades.
Yeah. I know a guy running 2 barber. He was a pimp. He was a pimp and left the life alone completely. Went to barber school, opened a barbershop, opened a second barbershop, about to open a third barbershop, making well into the 6 figures.
Wow.
And this is not a guy with a college degree. This is not a guy with anything, right? Yeah. And so I think the crux of it is that people don't know what they don't know. And I think we need to get more information out. And then I think those of us who can need to go open barbershops and go open businesses and go and teach, inspire, and also like come work with me. You don't know how many, Tim, you don't understand how many people I try to give jobs to, bro.
You want to give me one?
Yeah, we'll talk offline. We'll talk offline. No, I'm being serious.
Yeah,
you don't know
sure.
how many people I try to get to come in, work, and how few actually show up. How few actually show up and are willing to not be perfect. Can you just show up and learn?
Sure.
Bro.
Yeah.
People don't like hard work, man.
Listen, man, I said earlier in this conversation, we don't want to become fundamentalists all over again. I'm not trying to give a binary answer to complicated solutions. Sure. I think that there definitely are, what you just talked about, I experienced in my own life with the construction stuff. You know?
Hey, fun fact, this is our longest podcast yet.
Dude, I was going to say, we've been going for like
4 hours.
I'm at the point where I'm like, I am just like, where am I?
The only other thing.
Are we still alive?
Only other thing I wanted to talk to you about.
Don't you say it.
This would be the last thing.
Go ahead.
Trans.
Oh my God.
So the only thing I want to show you is check this out. This is the New York Times. In this podcast, we talked about every single hot topic issue going on in culture today. And as you can imagine, we said a lot of things that would get us ethered in the YouTube algorithm and probably violated a couple of community guidelines. So if you're the type of person that wants to see the full uncensored 4.5 hour long version of this conversation, sign up on Patreon for as little as $5 a month to get access to all of our podcasts.